Good afternoon to the officials of the Service Commission's Department. Welcome to the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. Good afternoon to the members of this committee, the media, and the general public. Today is the 25th of January, 2017. And on the 25th day of each month, the Parliament will continue to bring awareness of the United Nations observance of the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women and Girls, which is observed every year on the 25th of November. The theme, Orange the World, encourages persons to engage in activities which highlight the issues on the 25th of each day of the month for 2017. As a result, you would observe that members of this committee and the staff of the Parliament have worn something yellow, even if it is orange, even if it is the badge. And this is to commemorate the occasion. We wish to encourage members of the public to join us as we keep up awareness of the importance of working to end violence against women and girls. The Committee of Public Administration and Appropriations, the PAAC, has a mandate to consider and report to the House on A, the budgetary expenditure of government agencies to ensure that expenditures embarked upon in accordance with parliamentary approval. B, the budgetary expenditure of government agencies as it occurs and keeps Parliament informed of how the budget allocation is being implemented. And C, the administration of government agencies to determine hindrances to their efficacy and efficiency and to make recommendations to the government for improvement of public administration. The purpose of this 8th public meeting of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee for the 11th Parliament is to examine the system of inventory control of the following ministries and departments: Service Commissions Department, Ministry of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries, Ministry of National Security, Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs, Integrity Commission, and the Office of the Parliament. The committee is desirous of hearing from the accounting officers of these 6 ministries and departments to discover the challenges being faced and determine possible solutions to these challenges. The role of the committee is to assist the ministries and departments in achieving efficient delivery of services while ensuring that expenditure is embarked upon in accordance with parliamentary approval. This meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast live on Parliament's Channel 11, Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Viewers and listeners can send their comments related to today's inquiry via email to parl101@ttparliament.org. I will now like to take this opportunity to invite the representatives of the Service Commission Department to introduce themselves, and thereafter members of the committee shall introduce themselves. Madam PS.
Good afternoon, Chair. My name is Anastasia Screen, and I'm the Director of Personnel Administration. I will allow the members of my staff to my right to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon. My name is Prabhavati Miraj. I'm the Deputy Director of Personnel Administration, Service Commissions Department.
Good afternoon. My name is Alison Hughes, and I am the Acting Director of Corporate Services at the Commission Department.
Good afternoon. I am Judy C. Prasad, recently instituted Acting Executive Director, ICT.
Good afternoon. My name is Fana Rampol, the Auditor 1, Service Commission Department.
Good afternoon. I am Ms. Avril Camacho, the Storekeeper 1.
Thank you very much, Madam DPA and your staff. And may I invite the committee, starting from my extreme right, to introduce themselves.
Clarence Rambarat, member.
Senator Dineshwar Mahabir, member.
Maxi Kafi, member.
Lakram Bodo, vice chairman.
Ayana Webster Roy, member.
Wade Mark, member.
Alison Bash, member.
And I am Bridget Anisette George, chairman. We are ably assisted by Ms. Jacob, who is the committee's secretary, and Ms. Samuel, the assistant secretary to the committee. I will now invite the DPA to make an introductory statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon again to the members of the committee. The Service Commissions Department has 4 locations at present. 2 on Cipriani Boulevard, 1 at Page, and 1 at Wilson Road, Tobago. At each of our locations, we have stores are held, but our main stores are held at the head office on Cipriani Boulevard. Stores are issued on the basis of a requisition format. The stores are audited for compliance by the auditor in accordance with the financial regulations. Audits are conducted twice yearly, and once any matter is identified, action is taken immediately to correct the discrepancy if any is found. The auditor goes through a process of reporting to the relevant section and drawing it to their attention. So, for instance, if the store's register has not been updated at the time he's conducting an ad hoc audit, based on the fact that maybe the time that the store came in and the register may not have been updated, this is drawn to the attention of the overall supervisor for that section. The office manager and the storekeeper do monthly checks, or when stores are coming into the organization to be distributed. The units in the Service Commission Department that are involved in stores would be the IT unit. The IT unit has responsibility and interfaces with regard to items for computer inventory. There's the staff in the audit unit. The audit unit is comprised of an auditor 2, an auditor 1, an auditing assistant, and a clerk 1. And we have the office management unit, which is headed by the Director of Corporate Services. We have a clerk 4 as the office manager, the storekeeper, a clerk 3, a clerk 2, and a stores attendant. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam DPA. I will invite Member Mark to lead off the discussion with respect to this entity.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chairman. And let me also welcome the Service Commission, DPA team here today. We are dealing with the issue of inventory control. And before I put direct questions to you, I just wanted to place it in a context so we would all be familiarized with what we are dealing with here today. Now, inventory control deals essentially with the safeguarding of the state assets and properties, and to ensure what we call the efficient and effective service or delivery, I should say, of services. Now, the role of ministries would be very crucial in ensuring that proper systems are put in place so that the inventory control management mechanism is really up to speed. And we have witnessed through reports on an annual basis where the Auditor General has been speaking to various breaches in inventory controls at various ministries in which the financial regulations of 1965 seem to be continuously violated by various ministries and entities. So I wanted to paint that picture for you before we deal with the Service Commission. Now, we recognize and we have observed that in your submission, you suffer from staff shortages in that department or that unit. So much so that you don't have a stores keeper at the moment based on what you have submitted, and a clerk 4 is responsible for taking care of business as it relates to the maintenance of the inventory register. So the first question I would like to pose to get some clarification is this. As the department responsible for recruiting staff for all ministries and departments, what steps, Madam Creed, I think, DPA, are being taken by the DPA to resolve what you have described as an internal staff shortage, particularly when it comes to that unit that deals with inventory control, maintenance, and management? That's the first area I would like you to clear for this committee. What is being done to rectify the severe internal staff shortage?
Chair, if I may respond. Prior to 2015-16, Service Commission had a severe shortage. We had discussions with the Public Management Consultant Division of the Ministry of Public Administration to address the concerns we had in the area of inventory control and stores. As a result, coming out of those discussions, we received cabinet approval for 2 offices, a storekeeper and a stores attendant. Those 2 offices were transferred from the Ministry of National Security to the Service Commission's department. The storekeeper has assumed duty to date. The stores attendant has not. And we are having discussions right now with the PS, Ministry of National Security, if it is that ministry's intention to keep that officer, that we go back to the commission and finalize and sort out that. Further, having recognized that the stores must be properly audited, and at the point in time we had an auditor 1, an officer at the level of auditor 1, again with Public Management Consulting Division, we got a review of the accounting unit and the auditing unit. And at present, we have gotten a new position of an A1, an executive, accounting executive 1, and an auditor 2 position. The Public Service Commission, coming to the end of last year, filled the position of the auditor 1, and we're in the process right now of doing promotions, because these offices that we have gotten are generic offices in the entire public service. So when fillings are being done, it is being done for all ministries and departments where we have vacancies. So although we are Service Commission's department, like other ministries and departments, the units that will handle this will handle our office with the general public service. So we did indicate as a department, like all other departments, to the section that there's an urgent need for the filling of our A1 and for the finalization of the Commission's decision with regard to the Auditor 2.
May I follow up? Having regard to what you have said, would you indicate to this committee whether there has been any improvement thus far, given the supply of new forces to the Service Commission, even though you do have limitations as you have outlined? But with what you have been provided with, have you seen any tangible improvement in the inventory management control function at the Service Commission?
Yes, we have seen an improvement. The first thing we did was we got the team together, and we did an overall overview of what the systems that were in place, whether we had any gaps, where we needed to tighten. So an analysis was done, and with the assistance of the auditor, who I relied heavily on based on his experience, which is Mr. Rampol, we did some in-house training. We did a review of the systems. So at the present time, we must say that over the last 2 or 3 years, we have been able to tighten the system even more. while awaiting for the additional staff. The officers of audit and persons who have responsibility for inventory control, it is a critical role. And if you look at the normal public service system, these officers that are assigned to do these duties are at, I would say, at a low level in the public service. You have the requirements for such officers, requirements such as 5 GCU levels. So when persons are interested and they do come in, they don't come with the experience. Training has to be provided for them. Right now, we wrote to the Comptroller of Accounts in the midst of all of this, asking, can we even get specific training for the persons in Service Commissions Department? Because we have done as much as we can with the present resources that we have. We also wrote to the Ministry of Public Admin because they have responsibility for training, to also asking that if we can also get additional training in these areas to supplement what persons come to the job with.
All right. You also mentioned the issue of tagging of items, whether it be equipment, materials, or other matters that would be within the inventory system. You said that you had established a code that was developed for what you call IT equipment. You want to share with this committee, has this form of tagging proven successful and effective? This coding, or this code that you have established for what you call IT equipment, has that been successful? Has it proven to be successful in tagging?
If I may, sir, the auditor would like to approach this, because this exercise was done between audit and IT.
Okay.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Yes, the coding that we use was developed with the IT, in consultation with the IT. What we did, we had labels attached to each computer equipment that was available at the Service Commission Department in the following order. We had the departments such as accounts, acting, promotions, discipline, the chairman's office, exam sections, human resources, GSC, etc. Develop a system. We develop a system where we put each section name, the system model of the computer equipment that we audited, the system serial number, the keyboard serial number, the monitor serial number, the mouse serial number, and the UPS serial number on all the items placed in our inventory. So when we went to do the audits on these equipment, we were able to identify them easily, and if there was any discrepancies, easily rectify them.
May I just invite Member Mahabir at this stage to ask some questions? Member Mahabir.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My questions are rather mundane, because inventories are really meant to ensure that your organization functions efficiently. So if I were to come to the Service Commission today and ask you, how many printer cartridges do you have in stock at the moment? Do you have a system that you will be able to indicate to me how many you have currently in store for use? And would you also be able to tell me what the procedures are in place so that you would purchase these cartridges at the lowest possible cost, so maximizing the budget you have for the purchase of equipment, minor supplies, goods and services in the service commissions? Thank you.
With regards to your question about the inventory itself, we have in place certain registers and certain files. We would have, to ensure that we have the cartridges you're asking about, we would have an incoming inventory or stock register, right? That will incorporate when we purchase items, right, via the invoice and orders and the bills, right? A copy is made and submitted to the office management for it to place on the inventory. So that's the incoming inventory or stock file. We have a requisition file. That's the file that will issue items of stationery and stock to members of staff and different divisions. That and all will be used to update the registers, so we will be able to tell you exactly how many cartridges we have at any time. And we also have the stock register, which also itemizes every item we have in stock and says what is the balances at any point in time. From time to time, we may be a little off with regards to the nature of the duties we do.
Okay,
But we do update it.
Yeah, Mr. Auditor One, is this system an electronic system, or is it a paper register that you have?
Right. It is a paper registered document because we cannot, based on the regulations that we are presently using, right? There's no regulation that states we can put inventory on the computer. We cannot audit a computer, right, for lack of paper trail.
So you are saying that you have regulations which are preventing you, an organization of the state, from implementing the most advanced inventory control systems in place? What are these regulations? Because this is very important. If you do not have the correct, most up-to-date techniques to control the array of inventories, then something seems to be amiss with the regulations which govern you on inventory control.
The Comptroller of Accounts has issued a manual by the Ministry of Finance for internal auditors, right? This is a manual that outlines all the regulations that we are supposed to be adhering to. In this manual, if I can just go through some of the regulations, we must adhere to the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, Chapter 101, the Exchequer and Audit Act, Chapter 6901, the Financial Regulations to the Exchequer and Audit Act, Chapter 6901, the Financial Instructions, 1965, the Ministry of Finance and Controller of Accounts Circulars, Manuals and Terms and Conditions of Employment, Chief Personnel Officer Circulars, and Commissioners on Relevance Acts, Civil Service, Chapter 2301, Civil Service Regulations, Civil Service External Affairs Regulations, Public Service Commission Regulations, 1966. That's the last one, right? So in it,
one concluding question. If you were to implement a computerized system for inventory control, will you be in violation of the public service regulations?
yes, we would be.
Member Webster Roy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Congratulations on the tagging system you have implemented. Notwithstanding that, I'm sure there are instances where items would go missing. What system you have in place to determine if an item goes missing, if it was because of fraud or an error?
Once we detect an item is missing, we usually write to the head of department, and we do get things in writing back stating that the item was either misappropriated or on the wrong shelf, etc. We have never had, since I have been there have never been an instance where an item has been misplaced due to fraud. It has always been someone maybe have moved it from the shelves or from the system and placed it in another system.
So when you tag your items and you keep the purchase order as a reference so you know what items you have, so if it goes missing, you'll be able to follow up. That's what you do?
If you're speaking about computer inventory controls, yes. Every computer is all tagged. We do have a security system at the Service Commission Department that also detects the movement of items outside of working hours and during working hours, so that once we do the follow-up audits with the IT department, etc., we know that we are in compliance and nothing goes missing.
Okay, I just wanted to ask, in terms of your submission, a question was asked in the light of the proposed proclamation of the procurement legislation. What measures, if any, have been taken by your department in preparation? And I got the impression from the response that there was some training done, a one-day seminar, which was on the 5th of December 2016, and then some earlier training done in terms of April 2015 and July 2015. I think it's in the public domain that by the end of March this year, all state entities are to implement the procurement legislation. So that I wanted to find out in terms of the commission, if there is on stream any training, the setting up of a procurement unit, the improvement, say, of your project management function to meet the requirements of the full implementation of the procurement legislation in March.
We have been having discussions with Public Management Consultant Division with regard to the staff and the type of staff that would be suitable for the Service Commissions Department. Also, we have made a request for training because we have seen the need not only for the officers who work straight in inventory control, the office management and the auditor, but we have seen a need has been identified for the executive members of the Service Commissions Department to be exposed to training and all that the impact of this legislation. So we have limited funds at this point in time. That is why we were only able to send, because external training in inventory control could be a little pricey. So we were able to send 2 of the officers. We shared the information that was attained there. But what we really would like to do, and what we plan to do this year, along with the Ministry of Public Admin, is to get training from the senior human resource advisor level, more or less, in Service Commission, straight up to the executive, including our legal officers. Because we have seen a need for the legal officers, and having had discussions with the legal advisor, she has also identified that with the change in legislation, the legal persons will also need to get such training. So we have been trying to see where we can get the training. The training unit of this HR department of the Service Commissions Department has been doing research, communicating, looking to see where we could do that training. Again, with regard to the structure would have to get the sign-off, of course, from the Public Management Consulting Division of the Ministry of Public Admin. I don't know if anyone on the team, if there's anything that I'm missing that we have attempted to do that. I think more or less that is what we have been doing to prepare ourselves. We really are concerned because this is a serious piece of legislation. And even like security measures and additional security measures that you will want to put in place to ensure any follow-up in case any item is leaving the department. We have a tagging system, but right now we need to have more. What is more memory? To be able to track it, we need more memory from an IT point of view. I'm not an IT person, but I understand it in principle, so that at all the offices we can do that kind of tracking in case of anything. So there are things that we would like to put into place. IT is looking at it to see what we can and what we can do now with the limited resources that we do have, but we're attempting to cover all bases. So we're looking at training, we're looking at staffing, we're looking at ensuring that senior managers are being aware of the legislation and the impact of it. We're reviewing the systems we have in place right now in audit and in inventory, in the inventory section, all around. So we're trying to do an all-around readiness for the Service Commissions Department to be ready.
So what is the likelihood, because I understand the efforts that you have outlined, but today is the 25th. So what is the likelihood of any of them reaching fruition for this deadline date of the end of March, and whether you would be likely to be ready for the implementation?
I don't think we'll be totally ready.
Thank you. And I want to ask one other thing in terms of your submission, and that is with respect to safeguarding of the assets. And I got the impression that your security is really very reliant on security cameras and manned security guards. There is a statement that the department's security system is in need of upgrade. However, due to decrease in the level of funding, the department is currently unable to undertake this upgrade. And one, I wanted to know, therefore, how does the need for this upgrade impact on your level of security? And secondly, if you could kind of share the nature of the upgrade, and when is it likely to commence and be completed, having regard to your whole financial stringency, and what other sort of measures you could put in place to sort of safeguard what I would consider a vulnerability.
If I may, I will allow the Executive Director, ICT, and the Director, Corporate Services to take this question.
Okay, as far as I remember, approximately 2 years ago, we had invited vendors to come in to upgrade our system. We need cameras and additional areas within the Service Commissions Department. They had recommended a drawing of where the cameras should be positioned. Subsequent to that, we engaged a security consultant to advise us. By the time we got the drawings finalized, and given the estimated cost, it was close to the end of the financial year, so we could not make it then, and then we did not get funding in the subsequent years to undertake that. So this year we may need to look at going on a smaller scale than looking at the bigger picture, so that even if we can't get all, we should be able to do some, because it's not only for security of items or security of persons. Example, on the 5th floor where the executives and the DPA reside, we don't have any cameras there. So it's not only assets, but security of persons also we are looking at.
So that you said that you intend to do it sometime within this fiscal. We already, I think at the end of the first quarter, if my calculation is correct. So in terms of any plans, in terms of when you will start this, if you're looking at this fiscal and a quarter is already gone, then what you're likely to achieve by the end of this fiscal?
Like I said, it would be in the more critical areas. It would not be across the board, but we should get some within this fiscal.
Apart from that, are there any other measures that you have considered, having regard to your own limited funding, to sort of stem your vulnerability, both in assets and persons, as you've said?
I think one of the things that we are looking at is we recognize that we also need to upgrade our entry levels. What we have existing at the present time is we do have scanners, and we have some more or less obsolete, what is it?
Baggage scanners.
The scanners for the baggage and so on. So we do know that those are expensive. So what we are trying to do is we are looking to perhaps scan the market, acquire some quotations, look at the cheapest one and so on, and see how many of them we could really have, because we have four offices. So far, we have not been able to get, we need assistance in perhaps looking for the quotations and evaluating them to make sure that we get the value for the money, because some of them could be quite pricey. We started that investigation some time ago, but we were not able to complete it. But we are looking at having, at least if we could put in at two offices. We may not be able to complete all 4 offices, but we are certainly looking at having at least in head office where we have all the main inventories, and so we are at least trying to look at that.
A budgetary allocation for that?
Yes, but unfortunately I don't have it here with me.
But you have a budgetary allocation for that,
Yeah,
yes?
yes,
All
we
right.
do.
Member Mark?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. In your submission, you mentioned you had to expend between 2013 to 2016 an average of about $766,000 to replace and or to upgrade computer equipment and accessories. Would you want to provide us with a kind of breakdown in writing? You don't have to give us the information now, but you can probably submit it in writing to the chairman or the secretariat, and so we can have an appreciation. And I think the internal auditor was making the point that you talk about, you use the word, I don't know if it was the wrong word, but you use that when items are missing or misappropriated. I got that word. And misappropriation is a very serious matter. That is why the question was raised by one of my colleagues, whether it is simply a case of item missing through error or whether it is fraud. So when you use the word misappropriate, I was a bit concerned. That was an error?
Yes, what I mentioned is at the time of an audit, right? Items, since I've been at the Service Commission Department, we have never had a case of an item going missing because of fraud.
Okay.
Right? So what happened is it misplaced or placed in a different department and then found based on the queries that the auditor would have raised.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. DPA, may I also ask, just to follow up on what the chairman asked earlier, have you been able to determine through the Public Management Consulting Division what is the organizational structure that would be required to establish your procurement unit? The personnel that would be required, and therefore, given the resources that you have at your disposal, could you share with us what is the size and the personnel and their titles that would make up this procurement unit? And therefore, how many would be in place by the 31st of March, given the resources that you have at your disposal, and how many probably would not be able to be in place because of the same lack of resources? So we would be aware of some of your challenges in meeting the deadline of the 31st of March.
I must say at present where our discussions have reached, I cannot provide you with that information, with the details that you're asking me for at this point in time. If the chair will allow, we would have a follow-up meeting again with PMCD, and we might be able to give you an idea of what they have decided that is the best fit for the Service Commissions Department. But because they have been dealing not only with this matter with us, but they have had quite a few matters dealing with us. They have been very supportive in dealing with all the matters. That one we have not tied down as yet. So I can't give you the figures, the kind of detail that you're asking me for. I cannot provide it at this point in time.
Thank you. Member Coffey and then Member Mahabir.
Madam Chair, through you, maybe I can assist the DPA. I think the procurement unit, the Ministry of Finance has a committee that has recommended a certain size of units. I think that has gone across all the ministries. And I think the number is about 7 persons. The issue is, have you been able to identify from the staff that you have in the department, for example, the storekeeper or staff involved in procurement now outside of the Procurement Act, do you think you have the persons who can form the basis of a procurement unit in time to meet the deadline?
With the current bodies that we have, no. Not at this point in time. we would need additional support. Even because even in discussions, we were having a discussion even on the auditing of certain IT equipments and certain guidelines that are needed. Those guidelines would have to come from Auditor General, from whoever provides the guidelines, the Comptroller of Accounts, in what the exact extent of the audit that will be needed now based on this legislation. So we have been trying to understand what would be required, and that's why we are still in discussion, Minister. I haven't gotten any final feedback.
Just one. It's disconcerting to hear the DPA, since you are by and large responsible for recruitment, speak about the inability to recruit persons to fill various positions. Now, I know there are financial constraints, but barring the financial constraints, and you're also responsible for moving people to various positions, what could be the issue with filling position or recruiting position outside of the financial situation?
For this new Procurement Act, I think from a this is not my area of expertise into what are the best offices, but let us say, for instance, at the Service Commissions Department, the highest office we have and the requirement for that office is an entry-level requirement. This act, to me, needs persons with training and additional training in the areas. What's that? Specialized training. And that is why I'm waiting to, I really would like to see what would be the requirements for those offices, because do we have persons in the public service or persons available with the type of requirements? Do we have a pool out there of persons that we could source? So this is the kind of discussion that I was trying to find out, even for Service Commission, because if tomorrow the positions are approved and the offices are given, I need to hear for sure what would be the requirements for the office from the personnel department's point of view, to know are those persons, do we have a pool? Because it's not only Service Commissions Department, it will be all ministries of department will need whatever is the specialized skills and so on. But that hasn't reached, that information hasn't reached for me to know what is the level, what level of training and skills these persons would have to bring. So that is why I couldn't say, I'm not saying that if offices are there and they cannot be advertised and you advertise and people respond, but I can't say what are the special skills and the requirements at this point in time.
Member Mahabir.
Thank you once again, Madam Chair. I would like to get back to the issue of inventory control. And we know inventory is very wide. I spoke about the printer cartridge, which once used must be discarded. But you have inventory which do have a lifespan, and afterwards they are deemed to be obsolete. You have the computers, you have the printers, you have furniture, you may have items such as filing cabinets. Once these items have, according to the normal course of events, lived their useful life, but they still have market value, how do you go about liquidating these obsolete assets so that the state can at least recover some of the value still contained in the obsolete assets?
Okay. Usually, what we do for disposing of the items is we can't just dispose items. We call for a board of survey. And this board of survey, which is from the Central Tenders Board Act, we have a particular way to dispose of the items. So when the board of survey, when the members of the board of survey come, they then recommend which way we are supposed to dispose of the items. and we do that in accordance. If it is to destroy the items, they recommend companies that we could use, because these companies have to be so certified that they could do the disposal. If it is that they recommended that some of the items could be sold, they also recommend an auctioneer. And the process is done, and they get their report, and they do the necessary for whoever would have won the bid to get the items.
Are these auctions publicly advertised? Because I can't recall seeing one in recent times with respect to the disposal of these items.
The auction, yes, it's supposed to be in the paper.
Okay.
Newspapers.
When was the last time you had such an auction, and how frequent do you have them?
We had one for our vehicle. We had an old vehicle, and we went through that same process that I explained to you. That was in 2015. And arrangements were made, yes.
All right, I want to thank you, Madam DP, and your staff for coming and sharing with us in this enlightening conversation. Time is working against us. So I'm sure there's a lot more that we can discuss. What I would like to ask you as a final comment is if there's anything you would like to share with us that the committee could take into consideration in its recommendations to see how best it could assist you.
Well, one of the things that I see very critical is, as I have indicated before, is training. And training for different levels and different officers in the Service Commissions Department. What we have put into place is that we recognize in orienting new employees coming into the organization, one of the aspects that we never oriented persons before over the years was in procurement, inventory control, and things like that. So for new employees, we are giving them some information and exposing them to what auditing and stores, and the reasons why you can't just pick up a chair from here and move it to another section, the reasons why we are guided by regulations. So that an overview of that is something that we have put into place now for orientation for new employees. The persons who are presently in the office have indicated to me, for instance, the auditor one, that there is need for further training from where they sit right now to prepare themselves. So we have been trying to source and continue to source training for the account staff, the audit staff, the executive and the office management of the Service Commissions Department, and most important of all, the legal unit. Anything else?
So I thank you very much. We wish you a safe journey home. Thanks so much for coming. You are excused. This meeting is suspended just to allow for the officials from the next entity to come in. I now welcome the officials from the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries. The purpose of this meeting is to examine your ministry's system of inventory control. This meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast live. I will now invite the members and the officials from the ministry to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon. My name is Angela Sue. I'm the Acting Permanent Secretary.
Pleasant good afternoon. My name is Aliston Walters. I'm the auditor too.
Good afternoon all. I'm John Lewis, the ICT Director.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Terence Moore. I'm the Fleet Manager.
Good afternoon, I'm Sandra Ramuta, the AO4 in Property Management.
Good afternoon to all the members. I'm Catherine Ingrid Duncan, and I'm the Administrative Officer 5 of the Ministry.
Thank you very much. I would just like, for the benefit of the listening public, to know that Member Ramrath has recused himself as he is the minister in this ministry. And quickly, just for the introductions to the officials of the ministry, I'll just ask members to just quickly reintroduce themselves.
Dineshwar Mahabir, Senator Member.
Maxi Kafi, member.
Lakram Bodo, Vice Chairman.
Ayana Webster Roy, member.
Wade Mark, member.
Alison Bash, member.
And I am Bridget Anizet George. I'm the chairman. Our secretary is Ms. Jacob. Our assistant secretary is Ms. Samuel. I now invite the acting permanent secretary to make a brief opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Good afternoon again to Chairman and members of this committee. I recognize the role of this committee as an important one, and our presence here today as a team of the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries is really to get an understanding of the system of inventory control at the ministry. That is what we may have missed in our written responses in the 2 questionnaires that were presented to us in the recent past. We are happy to assist in your deliberations, and thank you for inviting us to this session. We are mindful that inventory control is critical to the efficient running of the ministry in delivery of its services. It is important that our divisions' needs are satisfied, and also that we get value for money in these tough economic times, as well as safeguard the ministry's assets and properties, so that forecasting, creation of records of items, overseeing the the constant flow of units in and out of the existing inventory are some of the elements considered to be very important. Our ministry generally has a manual inventory system and some computerized aspects. With our recent recruitment of our ICT director, it is our intention to computerize this function, which we consider to be a more efficient system. We look forward to these deliberations, and we hope that we have a fruitful session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam PS. I'm going to ask Member Ma to begin the discussion.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. And let me welcome the team from the Ministry of join the Chairman in welcoming you. Madam Permanent Secretary, given your ministry's submission on the items that we are examining today, we were informed, and there are about 4 questions, Madam Chair, I'd like to pose to the team. We were informed that the Property Management Department is responsible for updating the inventory register. And we also understand from your submission, this particular department is severely understaffed, with only an experienced clerk 3 and a handyman being assigned to this particular department to carry out this very important task and function. I would like to ask, are these persons, the experienced clerk 3 and the handyman, are they trained for such an undertaking? And secondly, what specific steps or measures are being undertaken by your ministry to address the issue of understaffing? Madam Chair, I have 4 questions. Do I go with 4 of them, or let them take one at a time?
I would suggest, Member Mark, you allow the PS and her team to answer.
Okay, thank you very much. While we may have 2 persons identified in our submission, we also have our AO4 who actually assists with this particular function. The persons involved, they have a wealth of experience, having worked there for a while. We had a clerk too, I believe it was, a clerk too, who went on vacation leave, and we had requested a replacement, but we didn't get one. So despite being the short staff, we have been able to cope with the demands, right? What measures are undertaken for the understaffing? Well, as I said, we had applied to Service Committee, we had sent a submission to Service Commission for us to get a replacement.
Would you like to share with this committee what is the ideal numbers or number? Would you like to share with this committee what would be the ideal number for the management department? Right now we have 2 persons, and you are claiming that they are very experienced. What, given the size of the ministry in question, what would be the ideal composition of this particular unit? Is it 10? Is it 5? And what categories would you require if you are to properly execute your responsibility?
Okay, well, probably what has happened in our submissions, it probably was a bit misleading. We are a very large ministry, and we have several units out throughout Trinidad. In those units, we have persons who look after stores and so on, all right? So in every area, like for instance, we have a regional administration north, we have a regional administration south. We have St. Augustine nurseries, different departments, and all these departments have stores, right? And we have people there. What we have there is for head office, right? The staff that deals with head office only, right? Now, in terms of the entire ministry, my personal view is that yes, we would need some assistance, and if we get other persons, that would be okay. We have been having some challenges with getting staff to come on board generally, but I'm satisfied with what is happening with our inventory control, given the resources that we have.
Would you be kind enough to provide to the chairman in writing the various units throughout the Ministry of Agriculture that is responsible for inventory management control, and the number of personnel that would be in each of those units throughout the ministry?
I will.
And let me go on to my second question. On the issue of tagging, we are informed that not all items in the inventory are tagged, according to your submission. I would like to ask why, and what is the current tagging system being employed by the Ministry of Agriculture?
Okay, currently, what we have, the items that we have tagged are the IT items, IT equipment and so on. We have an ongoing process of tagging all our items. This is going to be done through property management. With regard to why
are some tagged and some are not tagged?
Well, actually, the process of tagging, I understand, well, before I came, had just started, right? I've been there just a few months, and the process, that process has only recently begun.
So are you telling this committee that before you came 8 months ago or 6 months ago, all the state assets that fall under the purview of the Ministry of Agriculture, with the exception of IT equipment, have not been tagged, and you are now in the process of tagging them? Is that what you're telling this committee?
I'm telling you that, but I also want to tell you that we have an inventory register of everything that we have, according to the room, the sections, etc. We have that on record.
But they are not tagged?
But they are not tagged.
I'll come back to that maybe later, Honorable Chair. May I also ask, all assets you advise are monitored by security cameras where they are available. I wanted to ask what happens to those assets that are not covered by security cameras. What kind of mechanism would you have in place to monitor so you avoid items going missing or being pilfered or being stolen, as the case may be? What happens to those items and assets that are not monitored by security cameras?
Well, we have security personnel as state constables attached to the various buildings. We also have watchmen. The security personnel is supposed to log in whatever leaves, whatever comes in, whoever comes into the ministry compound, who leaves, what they leave with, etc. So that is one of the measures we have.
Have you had any instances of items being stolen, fraud being perpetuated or perpetrated against the ministry? Or is it a simple case of items gone missing, and when you investigate, you are able to locate those items? Or do you have a situation where items gone permanently missing?
We have had a couple situations where we have had breaking and entering and stealing of items, and that is investigated by, as I told you, we have security on the compound, and they are supposed to be patrolling and so on. In a case like that, we do an investigation with regard to what transpired at that particular time, and that if we call in the fingerprint expert, police, etc., and well, we haven't in these cases found anybody. Well, we haven't got the results yet from the fingerprinting, but in a case like that, people would be charged and so on.
Madam Chair, I have two more questions, two final questions. Procurement is around the corner, the 31st of March.
Yes.
Infrastructure is supposed to be in place, so when that act is formally proclaimed and operationalized, your ministry is supposed to be in a state of readiness for this new system. Could you inform this committee what is the state of play at the ministry as you prepare to welcome the new procurement regime?
Well, actually, the 1st of February, we're going to have 3 procurement people in place. Luckily for us, somebody was promoted out of one ministry into ours, and that person is a person who has a wealth of experience in procurement. 2 persons, actually. And we are going to get 1 person from within the ministry who is willing to be trained and so on. And that is how we're going to start. Now, we're only doing it right now at head office, right? And we intend to do it on a phased basis because, of course, the out offices as well would need to have, at least a couple persons there as well. So, so that is how we are starting. With regard to security, the installation of security cameras and so it's on an ongoing basis. But we have to understand that we're constrained by funding, right? So it is on the cards to be done.
My final question, Madam Chair, is to the Permanent Secretary, is this. The ministry has advised us that it is using informal guidelines to guide it when it is acquiring motor vehicles for use by the ministry. Would you want to share with us what are these informal guidelines utilized by your ministry? And what is your role as the permanent secretary in this entire process?
Well, informal guidelines here means for us, like for instance, at one point I used to work at the Ministry of Works, who is responsible for giving recommendations on the adequate use of a vehicle in a particular, depending on what it is needed for. And through that, I would call to kind of short circuit, right? I would call to find out, well, what is the best, what do you think would be the best vehicle to use, the best tractor or whatever, or even based on what we have, call to find out, well, do you think that what we have here using, if it is the right thing and that kind of, and that's the kind of informal guidelines. We have not been purchasing, since I'm there, we haven't purchased any vehicles, right? But that is one of the mechanisms I have used in the past to fast track the purchase of vehicles.
Member Mahavir and then Member Kafi.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I want to raise, Madam Permanent Secretary and members of the team, an issue that was made aware to us by the PS, and that is that the Agriculture Ministry is very wide, and that you do have offices not only in Port of Spain, but elsewhere in the country. And with these decentralized offices, take, for example, the St. Augustine Nursery, I don't know if Centeno also falls under your ambit. These decentralized stations will require inventory of a different type in order for the operations to run. It's not a typical paper and computer. It may be fertilizer and things to run the nurseries there. What I want to know is, in these decentralized facilities, do you have a dedicated inventory officer to ensure that the equipment, the items purchased for the running of these facilities are purchased in the quantities which are required, and second, are used only for the purposes of the facilities and are not diverted to outside uses?
To answer that question, I'll answer it broadly, not only for St. Augustine Nurseries, but for all our different offices. We have a manual system, I would say a very good system of recording what comes in, what goes out. We even have data, like for instance, on our livestock, we have data of birth, when it was born, who are the parents, how much it weighs, and all of that. All that information we have on our stock cards. And we also have like databases on it.
That function is basically discharged by the officers of the Ministry of Agriculture as per their job descriptions. But do you have, say, a dedicated officer who is in those outlying departments whose job it is to procure the items necessary for the efficient functioning of these entities and to ensure also that the raw materials so procured are guarded carefully for the use by the facilities and are not diverted to outside uses? Because I'd imagine items like fertilizer, etc., will have a demand outside the Ministry of Finance, and we do want to ensure that those items so procured are used only by the Ministry of Agriculture. So do you have such a dedicated officer?
Yes, we do. And in addition to that officer, we have the auditor, the persons from the internal audit, staff of the internal audit who go to audit on a regular basis.
Madam Acting PS, I just want to go back a minute to your response on the informal policy in terms of the acquisition of motor vehicles. And I want to get an idea of how the policy operates. So suppose, for example, a minister would ask for a Porsche to be procured for the ministry. What would be, how would that fit into your policy? How would you respond to a request like that in terms of the informal policy?
Well, first of all, to me, a Porsche would be out of the question. That vehicle is too expensive. Secondly, the minister would have a vehicle assigned, the vehicle would be assigned to the minister. What condition is that vehicle in? Is it still roadworthy? Is it about to conquer? All those things will have to be taken into consideration. I don't think that the Ministry of Works would advise me that a Porsche would be the correct vehicle, that a minister should drive.
What I'm getting at is that the ministry has acquired a Porsche previously.
Right.
So maybe it was under this informal policy. So if the informal policy gives you the leeway to acquire a luxury vehicle, would that be a proper policy that gives so much leeway in terms of the acquisition of a motor vehicle?
No, this informal policy thing, it's taken out of context. That is my personal way of finding out what is the best vehicle suited for a particular job. And it's because I was working in that particular place, and I have an idea of what would be required. I just ask the person or the persons there because sometimes if I have a doubt, I would say, well, I don't think this is adequate, and I would get a second opinion. But barring that, if we are to purchase any vehicle at all, we have to go through your 3-quote or whatever. That has to go back to Ministry of Works for them to say yea or nay, and if it's nay, for them to make a recommendation before I consider to purchase that vehicle.
Okay, just one other question. I see our policy for the disposal of obsolete equipment, including motor vehicles. Has the Porsche been disposed of according to that policy?
Okay, so let me put somebody on who was there to answer.
Reference disposable articles. In 2016, we did a disposal of the said Porsche. That was the only vehicle that we did a disposal on for 2016.
Okay, thank you. Madam PS, I just want to follow up on a comment made earlier with respect to a vehicle being assigned to the minister, and just any minister, the minister. And I just want to know that pursuant to what authority would a vehicle be assigned to a minister?
To conduct official duties.
Yeah.
In the conduct of
Is that in
official-
any regulation, any manual? You know, not for what use, but pursuant to what authority would a vehicle be assigned to a minister?
I believe it's more practice than in a regulation that, you know, a minister would be
Okay.
assigned.
All right, and how, would you have an idea of how recent the practice is? Is it of long standing?
Long standing in all ministries.
Okay, all right. And also I want to follow up on the three-court system, because in your submission, in terms of the acquisitions of materials and motor vehicles, I've seen that you employ a three-court system. And I would like, if you could share with us by what process the vendors or the suppliers are identified to be invited to participate in this three-court system.
Okay. Let me ask the property manager to answer that, please.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. What we do, we invite suppliers to submit, most times it would be either by email or fax. We would have a historical listing of suppliers who would usually supply goods and services to us. We also have the bonded contractors from the CTB listings, and what's not there, we go on the open market. Those goods and supplies would be considered the open market. And we would invite suppliers, but we also have the historical listing of suppliers. We'd also go to we have the register of small business. We can consider that as a possible source of suppliers. That's the Fair Share program as well. So we have a lot of people who we can actually make contact with, who can supply goods and services to us.
All right. So then I'd be correct in saying that you really use a subjective system to select the persons to be invited.
Yes.
Do you at all use the open system of inviting people by advertising or anything like that?
Well, actually, a lot of suppliers come to us. They actually come to us. They will give us samples of what their products are. So it's quite easy, because a lot of those businesses, especially small businesses, they would come into the ministry in person and they would give us catalogs, so we can have an idea what they are, you know, about.
So you don't use really like public advertisements inviting tenders?
No.
Okay. Do you have a tenders committee?
At present, we do have a, yes, we do.
You have?
Yes.
And may I ask officers of what positions comprise your tenders committee?
Okay, most of our tenders is really done through our engineering division for their projects. So I am not too acquainted, but they would have obviously expertise in whatever project that they're doing. They would have their experts who would comprise of this committee.
Yes, Madam, yes.
Let me add. Depending on what is to be procured, a tender committee would be put together with particular expertise, right? So if it's a project that it's, that, let's say, for instance, roads, engineering, we'd have an engineering component, we'd have the financial, we'd have our facilities manager. It depends on what it is. In the case of ordinary goods and services, like for instance office supplies and so on, we utilize what we would have. We look at what we would have used for the bonded, when we have the bonded suppliers, right? There may be persons, as you said, who would have sent what they have to offer, right? And then from those things, we look at all of those before we make a decision as to depending on what we want.
Yeah. And what is the role of the accounting officer in the selection of these vendors, whether it's through the bonded contractors or whether through your historical data?
Well, when the team chooses based on, well, their review of all the different companies and so on, that is sent up to the accounting officer for her review. They would give their justification why they're taking it, if it's based on cost, whether it's based on what they have to offer, if it's suitable for what is needed, etc. And on the basis of that, the accounting officer will say, yes, go ahead, or no, go back out and get other people.
Member Webster Roy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I noted earlier, in terms of your livestock and so on, you noted that you have a register so you could tag and monitor and track to prevent theft. What systems, what mechanism you have in place to monitor assets such as fuel to prevent theft of fuel and gas and diesel and that sort of thing?
Well, we now have the fleet card system, right? Which I think there are no loopholes, really, because as you purchase, it's recorded through the bank to the bank. The bank gets the amount, and we get that record from the bank. When the person purchases with the fleet card at the pump, they get a chit, which is brought back. We have our registers, which we populate based on what is used and so on. So.
So at the end of the day, you will monitor the logbook to see the mileage and compare it with the consumption of the fuel. So hypothetically, somebody would pull aside, siphon out gas and put it in a private vehicle, that sort of thing. How to prevent that?
Yes, the fleet manager is very adept at doing that.
Excellent.
Madam Pierce, I just wanted to engage a little more with the tagging. In terms of, if I understood you well, you said prior to, I can't remember the time frame, but maybe it's prior to your coming, there was no tagging.
No, I didn't say that.
All right, yes, but tagging is a recent
Tagging, when you all started to tag? This year.
This year?
No, not this year, last year.
Last year, 2016?
Yes, 2016. Yeah.
So that,
2016.
that would have been tagging with the tagging machine.
Yes, ma'am. We are speaking here specifically about our head office.
Yes.
But at the various outstations, they are very in control, and they have managed well to do their tagging, and this is always updated.
Yes.
Their inventory registers updated. Their tagging has been done in the outstations. And the audit would do their audit checks to make sure everything is in place. But at head office, we had some challenges, as we said earlier, because of the short staff. We had challenges, but we do have an inventory register at head office and at all outstations.
Yeah, I understand that, Ms. Ramuta, but
Yes.
two things I would like to say. In terms of what we're hearing now about your outstations, I would really like to suggest that the ministry does a supplemental submission that is not just limited to head office, but all that comes under the Ministry of Agriculture. That's the first thing. The second thing, in terms of the tagging, which I understand started in 2016 at the head office, was that a process limited to the tagging machine that you referred to in the submission?
Okay. So far, we have a labeling machine, and we tag the IT equipment. But as far as the furniture, the office furniture, and the photocopiers, those have not been labeled as yet. But we do have a register of everything that's in the offices at head office.
So that prior to 2016, at head office, nothing was tagged?
No.
Are you familiar with
Yes.
Regulations
Yes.
55, yes? You're familiar with that? So if I understand you well, would you agree that the practice prior to 2015 was in breach of this regulation?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes?
But I also would like to point out, ma'am, that I only inherited this position.
No, we're not,
So.
we're not casting blame. I just want to
Okay.
know if you
All right.
agree.
Okay.
Yes? And therefore, if that is so, would not that have been something that would have been flagged by the Auditor General?
Yes, it should have been flagged.
So why I ask that is that in terms of your submission, when it comes to information between 2011, 2015, there's something says that there is no information with regards to questions from the Auditor General. That information is not available.
Yes, and that may be because during that period, the ministry was fragmented. Well, we had Ministry of Food Production, Land and Marine Affairs, so all the different large divisions were part of other ministries. And anything that was found there would have been associated with those ministries. But what we found, we didn't find anything with regard to
so if I understand well, because in that period 2011 to 2015, there was no Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Yeah.
There
It
would
was
be no
fragmented.
finding against Ministry of
Yeah.
Lands.
Yeah.
But wouldn't those other entities have been subsumed now into your Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries?
Yes, it has been.
It has been. So that, isn't there the historical data?
No, we don't have the historical data.
Okay, all right. And then, just again on tagging, when you speak about your problems being that the machine may have broken down or the tagging paper has run out, those are the problems you see that you all experience in tagging currently. Might I ask if the running out of tagging paper is a question of inventory control also?
I would say so, because in inventory control, you're not supposed to run out of anything.
In terms of your response that tagging has helped your ministry, could you expand a bit on that in terms of how it has helped your ministry?
Well, I would say the tagging has allowed us to easily identify where the IT items are, because it really is a unique identifier. So for instance, whatever the number of the tag says, we will know, well, look, this is located in PS's office, there's only one of it, or information like that.
And in terms of your furniture and other assets that are not currently tagged, do you have plans to tag them, and how soon?
We are in the process of moving. We have, at the location, we have some furniture there already, so that we may have access furniture, which we would offer to other ministries. And in that process, yes, we will have it on the register, right? But we may not need to tag it then. That's how I see it.
All right, so if I understand well, the tagging will take place post-move?
For the furniture, in
furniture.
head office, that is.
So
only.
can I say then, what process, what system you would have in place to ensure that there is no hemorrhage of furniture and equipment between what is there and your actual move?
Well, actually, very few things will be moved from where we are at head office. Each room at head office, we have an inventory of what is there. So it's difficult let's say, for instance, we're moving 2 chairs from the PS's office, right? On the register, we'll indicate that these 2 pieces are moving. We'll identify who is moving with, where it's going to, right? So we'll be able to check to see whether, if it's missing, who it would have been missing with, right? So everywhere along the process, we'll be able to identify. We have a very comprehensive list of all the things that we have.
And I wish to, Member Mabia.
Just to take up, Madam Chair, from a point that you left off with respect to the acquisition of motor vehicles, I just want to broaden the inquiry a bit to inquire whether, with respect to items that you have which may be in line for disposal, do you have a policy where you make these items available for purchase by the registered farmers in Trinidad and Tobago? So if you have a 4-wheeler or a tractor or any item which may be farm-specific, do you make those available so that you can liquidate them and also provide a benefit to the farming community?
No, sir, we cannot do that. There's a process for disposal of such items.
Okay, and what is the process?
The process is that we, the division would identify like this particular item is unserviceable, obsolete, whatever the condition it's in, and then we write to the Ministry of Finance. It's a particular form that you fill out, and we send it to the Ministry of Finance. The Ministry of Finance will send their team to inspect it to see whether, and they will decide what is to be done with it. We cannot decide what is to be done with it.
Madam PS, I just want to thank you and your team for the very enlightening conversation we've had. I think we could really go on ad infinitum, but we have other entities to examine. Just before we close, I'd like to ask you if there's any closing statement you'd like to make with respect to recommendations that the committee may consider to advance to assist you in the functions of inventory control that we are examining.
I think one of the key elements would be training the staff. Right now, before I was able to get this public officer, a couple of public officers to come across, we were trying to get somebody on contract for services just to start up and to train people, and it's difficult to get people. So I would suggest training for staff identified. If we could get that as of yesterday, at least, for us to start, it will be the first phase. Also, I think procurement training and layman procurement training for our heads of division would go a long way, because they would be able to rule out what is necessary to do and what is not.
Thank you very much. I now discharge you all and wish you all a safe journey home. Thank you. This meeting is now suspended. Good afternoon to the Permanent Secretary and other officials from the Ministry of National Security. The purpose of this meeting of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee is to examine your ministry's system of inventory control. This meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast live. I would invite the officials from the Ministry of National Security to introduce themselves.
Afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. Lydia Jacobs, Permanent Secretary, Acting.
Permanent Secretary, Chairman of the committee and members, Vel Lewis, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of National Security.
Chairman of the committee and members, Ms. Anne Hiraman, Acting EU4 Office Management.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. Robert Williams, Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service, Fire Station Officer.
Good afternoon, Chair. My name is Marilyn McDonald, Prison Supervisor, Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service.
Thank you. And may I just ask the members? Oh, there's one more person. Sorry.
Good afternoon, Chair. Deputy Permanent Secretary Acting, Ministry of National Security.
Good afternoon, all. It's Alicia Mohammed from Internal Audit.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Colonel Gomez, Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force.
Again, I must apologize to the last three members. I did not at all intend to exclude you all. And might I just ask the members of the committee to introduce themselves?
Clarence Rambarat, member.
Ishwar Mahavir, member.
Maxi Coffee, member.
Lakram Bodo, Deputy Chairman.
Ayana Webster Roy, member.
Wade Mark, member.
Alison Bash, member.
And I am Bridget Anizet George, chairman. Ms. Jacob is our secretary. Ms. Samuel is our assistant secretary. Might I invite the PS to make a brief introductory statement?
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. The Ministry of National Security has the primary responsibility for ensuring and maintaining the security of the territory and peoples of the country, and is charged with a three-pronged operational mandate, both domestic and external, as follows: maintenance of law and order, public safety, and defense against aggression, management of disaster preparedness and relief, and monitoring and control of the flow of persons into and out of the country. This is a very large ministry with specialized divisions, and some of these unique features will also be reflected in our various stores. In order to effectively deliver on our mandate, the governance of the organization must be such that impediments to accountability are eliminated, while conformance with existing rules and regulations are retained and enforced. In this regard, inventory control is but one of the mechanisms used to contribute to good governance. While some aspects of the ministry's systems will need strengthening, we are committed to excellence in the long term by implementing an electronic-based asset management system, which will be effected, among other variables, the availability of funding. We have a comprehensive team here today, and we will do our best to answer all the issues that are raised. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam PS. And I think I would like to start off where you left off in terms of your plans for your electronic inventory system. And I understood that it's subject to availability of funds. Is that likely at all to come on stream in fiscal 2017?
No, Madam Chair. As I said, we are looking at a long-term prognosis. We have a manual system in place, and recognizing that really for efficiency, we really need to transfer into a more response-based system, which will be electronic in nature. I understand some time ago they had tried a little system, but it fell by the wayside, so we need to just move ahead and start again.
So it's subject to the availability of funds, so you can't really say when?
Not at this time, but we also, I had a brief chat with my colleague at Public Administration, and I know that ministry has under its control the IGOV TT unit, and there are possibilities for coordinating and seeing what is available through the many agreements we would have signed with Microsoft and other agencies.
Now, in your submission, you had indicated that the Facilities Management Unit of the ministry keeps a detailed record of all vehicles purchased by the ministry. And I would like to know, how is this done? What method?
Well, as I said, it's manual, but in my submission, we confined a lot of our issues to the general admin. That was a little error, but the general administration division. But as I said, it's a manual-based system where vehicles are registered and kept under the office. Between the facilities manager and the office management, they have direct control over maintaining a registry there.
And therefore, how is this done by the other units, the fire, TTDF? How is this done?
Well, I can let them each speak for themselves, Chair. Okay.
Madam Chair, the Defense Force has several formations: the regiment, the Coast Guard, the Air Guard, the reserves, and the headquarters as a coordinating unit. Each one of these formations would have a mechanical transport officer whose job is to maintain these registers of vehicles. They also have a supply officer, or in the regiment called a quartermaster, whose job is to take in these vehicles and register them on entry. So the vehicle registers are maintained at two locations. The quartermaster and the supply officer on entry, and the MTO on a daily ongoing basis.
Madam Chair, the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service, our vehicle registration and inventory is maintained by both the brigade engineer, who is the overall in charge of all the mechanical operations of the fire service, as well as there is an inventory held at the fire service stores. Both these departments keep track of vehicle assignments and placement and so on.
Say your method of doing this is effective?
Yes, it is effective. It can be improved, but it can be effective. If we look now for where a vehicle is assigned or so, those records can easily be found.
Okay. In terms of you saying it can be improved, in terms of would it be compliance with the existing method, or are you thinking of some other method being adopted?
Well, the area of improvement we would need to look at is electronic. We are not yet in that area. Is the area we want to get into. We do have a software, but we have not implemented that aspect of it just yet.
Now, in terms of the, I'm talking now about the vehicles, and in terms of disposal of vehicles. In the submission, Madam PS, what we have seen is that vehicles are replaced only when they're written off or become obsolete. And I'm really interested to find out what is the measure of determining that a vehicle is obsolete.
There are a number of factors, and we will go through because the various arms would have different measuring sticks. But one of the ways we look at determining if a vehicle can be written off or not is the expenditure incurred when we look at the maintenance of such a vehicle over a period of time. You also look at sometimes the availability of how you will get your spares and the length of time it is taken as vehicle models go out of time, right? So, but there is evidence about the useful life of a vehicle, and we go through the normal protocols thereafter.
Okay. TTDF.
Madam Chair, for some vehicles, we normally use the 5-year age limit to assess the vehicles, whether they can continue on or whether we look to dispose of them. Naturally, if the vehicle is involved in vehicle accidents, etc., that may happen before the 5-year period. For vehicles, patrol vehicles, troop carriers, which are our trucks that carry service personnel, operationally, we would look at between 5 and 10 years, we assess the vehicle. So that is done on a continuous basis by our mechanical transport officer in each one of the formations, who will then make recommendations as to whether the vehicle is beyond economic repair.
Yeah. So you basically look at an age as your first benchmark?
Yes, Madam Chair, we look at age as a first benchmark.
Yes. Okay. Fire?
Madam Chair, similarly to Defense Force, age, but also we look at effectiveness in terms of the vehicle's response and performance on any given scene, whether or not you have to have a high maintenance cost in order to keep that vehicle running. That is one of the factors that we would look at, in addition to age and whether or not the vehicle was involved in any incident or so that may no longer be suitable to keep it on the run.
Prison, is it a similar sort of determination as with fire and TTDF?
Yes, it is.
All right, so might I ask then, in terms of the disposal, from what your submission, I see that it goes to Central Tenders Board, and a board of survey is commissioned in the matter. In terms of each of your agencies, when last you all would have disposed with any vehicles?
I can recall around 2014 thereabout, we had auction off some vehicles. Recently, we have put up some for Board of Survey, approximately maybe around 23 odd vehicles. And right now we have probably 50 something to be placed before board.
The Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service, as recently as 2 months ago, by way of auction, disposed of a number of vehicles following the border survey process.
Madam Chair, within the Defense Force, within the last 2 years, we have been actively disposing of vehicles, and we have, at this time, Defense Force headquarters and the reserves disposals pending in some sort of, along the process. So we are actively engaging in disposal of vehicles that are beyond economic repair.
General Administration.
With general administration also, we look at the economical analysis of vehicle, look at the cost of the vehicle, the cost of maintenance, look at the age of the vehicle, and look at the needs of the vehicle was used, the functions of the vehicle. And based on those factors, we will then decide to dispose of the vehicle.
And when would have been your last exercise in disposal?
I think last year we disposed of one of the vehicles.
Yes, and you would have done that through the border survey?
Through the border survey.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Now, Member Mahabir, may I invite you to join the discussion?
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair. We are focused on vehicles, and mention was made about economic life and so on. But what I'd like to determine is really, what are the programs in place that you have to extend the life of vehicles? As you're no doubt aware, the country is finding itself in a bit of a financial fix, and that we ought to be extending the life of a lot of our hardware and material that we normally would replace on a regular basis. So I'm just wondering, from each of the departments, what are the procedures you have to ensure that you can extend the life of the rolling stock that you have for as long as is possible, so that you would have a number of usable items to serve the public interest in your possession.
Insofar as the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service is concerned, we have, as designed by the brigade engineer, a maintenance schedule that is expected to extend the life of the vehicle. While there might be challenges in meeting the maintenance schedule on its deadline, we pursue it relentlessly in the hope that it will bring the result that you spoke of, extending the life.
With respect to the Defense Force, we have managers in terms of mechanical transport officers whose job is to ensure the fleet is operational. Essentially, vehicles within their first 5 years, we tend to use the manufacturer, the distributor in Trinidad, to maintain the vehicle, to maintain warranties on the vehicle, to ensure that work is done in compliance with the manufacturer's specifications. As the vehicles get older, we also have an engineer battalion with mechanics equipped to also repair vehicles in terms of bodywork, in terms of engine repair, etc. We use also some private contractors in also to keep the fleet operational. As far as possible, we try to maintain the maintenance schedule with regard to the vehicles, all of which are geared towards extending the life of the vehicle. To support all of that, we have a robust standing orders with regard to use and how we deal with abuse with regard to vehicles. And of course, the military justice system is used to support that effort.
Follow-up question. Do you have, both from the fire, the police, and the defense force, an estimate of the average age of the usable vehicles in your possession at this time? And has that average age been increasing over the years?
Not at this time, Member.
Okay, Member Bodo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Pierce's question really regards this storage of sensitive materials. And in response to your question, the answer would have been very broad. And I'm not sure if this is an appropriate question, but with the question of the storage of passports, which is state property, come under the remit of the Ministry of National Security. Am I correct in assuming that? Can you then tell this committee, Madam PS, what steps would be taken while passports are stored for collection by recipients to ensure that there is no access or no opportunity for fraudulent activity to take place?
Well, I know that the Chief Immigration Officer has strict controls over entry and exit to those areas where passports and other documents would be stored. I know that in some areas within the Ministry of National Security, there are card readers and different other devices to ensure that only the persons so authorized to enter specific areas are allowed to enter. But they have very strict controls in terms of entry and exit to specific areas, designated areas.
Member Mark?
Yeah. Madam Chairman. To the Permanent Secretary, in your submission, it was stated that an error in the inventory register in this office management unit was identified, but you didn't indicate to us what was this error and how long this error lasted. Would you like to share with us what this error was?
Member, could you be more specific? I'm not, you mean in my opening remarks when I made it?
No, I'm saying in the submission that was made.
Question 5. That would reference the inventory register?
Yes, the management, the office management unit that is responsible for keeping the register.
I think that what is there really is about the absence of the inventory register in the office management unit, but that has since been rectified. So it was just the absence of the register in the unit.
When you say the absence, did the register went missing?
Correct. That is very correct.
For over what period of time?
I can't answer the period of time, but we have continuous turnovers of staff, and sometimes the process of transmission and persons moving from one position to the next is not as smooth as we would like it. So I believe sometime prior to my assumption, they would have not been able to locate the original register, so they started one moving forward. And we are still looking for that old register.
And that register would have covered item for over what period?
Yeah, about 2012 to 15.
2012 to 15?
Yes.
And that went missing?
Yeah, well, we are still trying to locate it at this time.
I see. Could you tell us what's the size of your management unit, the office
The office management?
unit? How many persons make up this particular unit?
I'd let the office manager respond, if I may.
Okay. The office management unit consists of 4 clerks, 4 inventory clerks, headed by the administrative officer 4, and we have an administrative officer 2.
All trained, you say inventory officers? Is that a term that you have coined? Or is it, for instance, these are real titles for the office holders within the unit that you have identified?
Okay. These officers are not per se inventory clerks, but they have knowledge of inventory. That's what they do. They have experience in that area.
And they are trained. They are subject to training, so they will understand what the inventory management control system is all about and the rules and regulations governing those systems.
It's as far as possible.
As far as possible. This is serious. This is a very serious matter. Yeah. We are dealing with the safeguarding of the assets of the state. So it cannot be, we cannot be halfway. It is either these people are trained or they are not trained. And if they are not trained and there's a deficit, then you must let us know so we can seek to help you, because this is a very important matter. And even in the Ministry of National Security, you could have an inventory, a register gone missing for 3 years and not discovered as yet. And you are telling us now we are not too sure if they are trained or not. We need to take our task a little more seriously. And therefore I'm asking you whether these personnel have been trained for this task.
If I may, in all fairness to Ms. Hiraman, she has just taken over that portfolio. As I mentioned before, there's a considerable turnover of staff within the public sector, so that while staff would be afforded some training, I cannot say that they would be experts in all areas, but they would be very competent in the job that they are doing. Now, there's always room for improvement in terms of training, because we have recognized that because of this constant movement, we have to be constantly doing the same things over and over. So that is a part of our moving forward. Our continuous improvement is training, right? But they are very competent. They are able to maintain their registers and their cards and all the paraphernalia that goes with, the stores.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Member Rambara.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have 3 quick questions, I think all fire-related. But I'm directing it to you, PS. First is to ask, what became of the infamous fire truck that it was literally, from what I gathered, the candle costing more than the funeral. What became of that fire truck?
I will let the fire representative answer that, sir.
The fire truck was removed from where it went off the precipice, and it is now housed at the Shoguners Fire Station. It is not in use, and it has not been repaired.
Okay. The second question, I recall on Friday, May 8, 2015, an article in The Guardian which referred to the purchase, or there was what caught my attention back then was a photo of a black Lexus. And the story was about the fire services acquiring 15 vehicles at a cost of just over $4 million. And the headline of the article was something relating to no money for fire equipment, but money for cars, something to that effect. And in there was a statement attributed to Roswell Bruce, at the time acting Chief Fire Officer. I'm not sure if he's still acting Chief Fire Officer. And it struck me, he said, it is easier to acquire these vehicles. He was asked, why are we not acquiring vehicles to fight fire? And his response was, it is easier to acquire these vehicles than the fire tenders and all of that, because there's a lot of work involved in acquiring fire tenders. And it struck me as one of the strangest responses I've ever heard from a public official in this country. How do you, from an inventory control and an acquisition point of view, how is the decision made relating to prioritizing expenditure on the acquisition of vehicles?
The decision is made taking into consideration the overall needs of the fire service. The fire service, like other organizations, here it is a mobile organization. We need to go wherever the risk is. So once we establish the need for firefighting equipment, firefighting appliances, other types of rescue appliances, the focus will go to vehicles that may need to be used in other areas of the fire service. And while what Mr. Bruce was trying to say is that it takes a shorter time to acquire utilities, what we call utilities, than it would to acquire a fire appliance. So that the process to acquire fire appliance is much longer. Whereas if you are acquiring appliance utility from a local provider, you would get it in a much shorter time. And not that utilities, as we call them, are more important.
I would leave it for another member to follow up on that, because the third question is the one that that aggravates me the most. Last year for the Independence Parade, my eye fell on I can't describe, I don't know the type of vehicle. I know it's a 4x4 vehicle, a Hilux or something like that. In fact, in a Toronto newspaper, subsequently, it was described as a pimped fire truck. And this is a fire truck. Subsequently, every time I leave the Parliament during the daytime, I see it at Wrightson Road. This is a vehicle with chrome accessories, fancy painting and all of that, and copper rims. And I wondered, who in their right mind, recognizing the state of the fire services and the challenge of resources and equipment, would make a decision to purchase something like that and have it, just somewhere on Wrightson Road there. It strikes me as something aggravating in the least.
That is not something I can answer. I can tell you before Mr. Bruce, that vehicle existed, and there were several chief officers before him. So I am unsure which one of them would have been responsible for that particular item that you're seeing.
I would just close by saying that's why I directed it to the permanent secretary, because I had to recuse myself over the Porsche Cayenne discussion, which as a minister I made sure that it was disposed, not because of the acquisition cost, but because of the signal it sent to the stakeholders I represent and the taxpayers of this country. And that to me is a very aggravating signal that is sent. It serves absolutely no purpose for the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service. Thanks.
Member Bodo.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. This question again refers to the issue of inventory control and the storage of sensitive materials. And it's perhaps might be best answered by the TTDF, but through to you, Madam PS. I'm just wondering about the storage and the arrangements for firearms and ammunitions in view, of the very sensitive nature of that. Can you shed some light on that? To give the assurance to the public that there is proper storage and control of these items.
Yes, member. With regard to the defense force, within every garrison, every base, every camp, there would be an armory. And storemen, duty storemen or duty armorers are assigned to that duty 24/7. So weapons are constantly monitored. We also have a duty in the Army. It's called the orderly officer or the duty officer in the Coast Guard, officer of the day, whose job it is to check those weapons, and it's done sometimes several times a day. They would check and ensure that the records are updated in terms of when weapons are issued. So we have a very robust system that is geared towards checking our arms on a daily basis. With regard to ammunition, we equally have senior NCOs, senior non-commissioned officers, whose sole purpose is to account for the ammunition. If we are having a training exercise, that senior NCO would proceed to the range with the ammunition. So the ammunition is not just given to any and everybody, and they would oversee those things. So we have a very robust system.
Can I follow up then through you, Madam PS? Can the public then have the assurance that, no arms or ammunition under the control of the TTDF would find its way outside of authorized hands?
I would like to give the assurance that the TTDF has a robust system that constantly monitors arms and ammunition. If there is a breach, we have shown in the past that we are able to remedy that breach very quickly because of the monitoring that we have on those controlled items.
Follow up, Madam Chair, just briefly.
Well, I'd like to, Member Mahabe, if you could just hold your question, because I've recognized Member Coffey already.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to go back to the fire truck for a minute. Now, you said it's parked up at the Shogunas Fire Station. Why hasn't it been disposed of in relation to your policy of disposal of assets? And in terms of when you decide to acquire equipment, is it that it can't be repaired, it can't be used for stores? What's the issue there?
At this time, I'm not in the best position to answer that. That is a decision that would be in the hands of the brigade engineer, who is responsible for that kind of thing, as well as the chief officer. I can't see why it has not been done.
Okay, at this stage, having regard to the time, I would have to wind up the discussion. What I would like, though, is to ask Madam PS to, by Friday, the 3rd of February, if you can certainly send to the committee a supplemental submission with respect to the initial questionnaire, as it will relate to the agencies under the Ministry, Fire, Prisons, TTDF. And there are some other questions which we have not been able to ask here. We'd also send you those and ask that you answer those in writing. Before I close, though, I would like to invite you to make any closing statement with respect to any recommendations which you would like to make having regard to the issue under inquiry here that the committee could take into consideration.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I indicated earlier, one area of concern is a strong word, but one area in which we recognize that there's work to be done is the area of training across all aspects of inventory control. As I mentioned before, in the public service, there's considerable turnaround of staff. We have acting continuously, so somebody may sit in a chair for 3-4 months or a year, and then they move along. So we do have to get the issue of training up and running in a more systematic way. But we do have all the submissions ready, and so that would not be a problem to send it to you by Friday. So I look forward to the questions that you would send as well, and we will be able to respond to those in a timely manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank you, Madam PS, and the members of your team for coming and sharing in this conversation with us. I wish you all a pleasant evening and a safe journey home. Thank you.
Thank you.
This session is now suspended. We now have the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs, and I welcome the officers and officials from that ministry. The purpose of this meeting of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee is to examine your ministry's system of inventory control. This meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast live. I will now invite the PS to introduce the members of her team.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. I'm Ingrid Siratan from the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs, and I'll allow the officers to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, Chair. I'm Helen Budu Singh, Administrative Officer 5.
Good afternoon, Chair. I'm Kamini Duku, Administrative Officer 4.
Good afternoon, Chair. I'm Lena Brishnal, Acting Administrative Officer 2.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. I'm Nataki Atiba-Dilchan, Deputy Permanent Secretary Acting.
Good afternoon, Chair. I'm Edwin St. John, Acting Auditor 2.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. I am Neil Ramratan, Administrative Officer 2, Acting.
Thank you very much. And might I ask the members of the committee to kindly introduce themselves?
Clarence Rambarat, member.
Dineshwar Mahavir, member.
Maxi Kafi, member.
Lakram Bodo, Vice Chairman.
Ayana Webster Roy, member.
Wade Mark, member.
Alison Bash, member.
Bridget Anizet George, Chairman. We ably assisted by our Secretary, Ms. Kiba Jacob, and our Assistant Secretary, Ms. Shiran Samuel. And on my behalf, I can't help but do this, but to say a pleasant welcome to the Deputy Permanent Secretary Acting to her old home. I therefore now invite the Permanent Secretary to make a brief opening statement.
Good afternoon again, and thank you. The Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs, with effect from September 2015, became a merged ministry of the former Ministry of the Attorney General and the former Ministry of Legal Affairs. It was only in October of 2016 that the ministry of what became known as the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs was able to finally occupy the same space at the government campus at Richmond Street in Port of Spain. And that with that brought the whole process of consolidating all of the processes of both ministries and departments. The Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs is responsible for providing legal services to all ministries and departments and other state agencies. Now, under the Constitution, the Attorney General is the guardian of the public interest and ensures that the rights of the citizens are protected. The core services provided by the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs, advocacy, case management, which is provided by the DPP's office, the Solicitor General's office, the Chief State Solicitor's office, department. Legislative drafting done by the Chief Parliamentary Counsel, that department. Legal advice and facilitation provided again by the Solicitor General and also by the Central Authority. We have the registration, which exists under the Registrar General's department, births, deaths, marriages, companies, etc. Then we have law reform, that department dealing with the reform of legislation, law revision, and also existing the administrative and technical services provided by core units of the ministry and departments. As I indicated, in October, the ministry was able to exist in one space. There are still some departments still to move into the towers, like the Registrar General's department, for which we are working assiduously to ensure that that department finally moves into the towers to exist in the same space with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam PS. And before we open the conversation on today's subject, just as a matter of some house cleaning, I was just going to ask you to please explain to the committee why to date we have not got your ministerial response to the first report of the committee, which was due January the 16th.
The response was prepared and submitted for vetting to the Honorable Attorney General, who is to provide his feedback on the documentation.
Okay, and Madam P.S., in the circumstances, I don't recall us being provided with a request for an extension, and maybe that has been overlooked. But what I would really ask is if within the next week, the ministerial response could be forthcoming. Thank you very much.
Noted, Madam Chair.
And
it
might
will
I
be done.
invite Member Bash to begin today's conversation?
Madam Chair, through you, in your submission to the Parliament, you've indicated that due to the high turnover rate of staff, that constant training and retraining of staff is required. Can you provide insight into what contributes to the fast turnover rate, and also what measures are being put in place to curb this?
To answer your question, member, what has happened in the past is that we've asked for training on several occasions for staff in office management, inventory control. We've not been provided. What we've done and also there has been a constant turnover of staff. Staff in the unit become eligible for acting, they act in higher office, or they move out of the unit to other units. So that constant turnover of staff is very rapid. There's always that we have to do, because of the absence of official training, there's a constant on-the-job training. We keep, it's always happening, on-the-job training by past members, those remaining by the AO4 and the AO5, constant retraining of staff who would come to the unit. So when that happens, there's always that, how should I put it, that little period when members of the staff would have to come up to speed in terms of dealing with inventory within the department.
Okay, the training that is provided for the staff, is it paid for by the ministry or the agency?
If they are, let's say for instance, the Ministry of Public Administration should select one of our members of staff to attend any of the training that might be provided, that's at no cost. If we send the staff outside to some other private organization that may be offering training in the particular area, it is paid for by the ministry.
My other question is, what is the selection criteria used to choose people to go on training?
Generally, or within the inventory office management.
Mm-hmm.
We look at the training program that is being provided or being offered by any of the organizations, and we select from within the unit the officers who would best be able to access the training and to be able to come back and also to hand that training over to members of the unit. So we select from within the particular unit depending on the nature of the training that is being offered.
Deals with the target of items. Prior to the relocation and merging of the ministries, what practices were used by the Ministry of Legal Affairs with regards to the target of inventory?
Prior to that, the relocation, there was a difficulty in that particular ministry, and because it was not being followed up. What happened, the unit that was in fact responsible for undertaking that process and those procedures was disbanded by the former PS. And all of the responsibilities that came from that unit fell, well, to temporary staff who did not carry out the functions. So with the merging of the two ministries in September of 2015, the records when we finally were able to get our hands on the records, it was recognized that most of the records there coming from the ministry was not, in fact, kept up to date, was not in order. So we had to begin to trace from the beginning in several areas the genesis of many of the files, many of the purchases. We had to go and begin to trace from the very beginning in many of the areas to locate purchases, to locate receipts, to provide any documentation or information we required. We had to go and begin to rebuild, as if we can put it that way.
As a result of the problem of faced with the labels becoming faded or damaged over time, have other forms of tagging been considered, other forms of tagging to avoid this happening in the future?
I have to admit that that has not been a consideration thus far in terms of using any other form of labeling in the ministry. But that has been the major avenue that we've used, the labeling machines, to ensure that all furniture, equipment, and so it's in fact labeled.
Dr. Bodo, and then Member Mark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam PS, I would just like to take you back to, just to follow up on the issue of training.
Sorry, sir.
So I'd just like to take you back to the issue of training.
Yes, sir.
And to follow up on line of question inquiry by Member Bash. And in your submission, you've stated that the ministry has been recommending officers for the course entitled Stores Management in the Public Service, offered by the Public Service Academy, but very few are selected for training. Can you perhaps explain why this is so?
When the circulars circulated by the ministry requesting us to provide names of persons possible names of persons to attend training, we would recommend individuals to attend. It is up to the ministry, relevant ministry, to select. And thus far, from our records indicating, not many of our staff of the ministry has been selected to go on any of those programs.
Yeah, are there any reasons that are given when staff is not selected, or do you get any feedback as to whether they would have met the requirements, or what are the reasons why they weren't selected?
We're not usually provided with feedback as to why. We're just told that you're not selected. No feedback as to indicate a reason or rationale for why.
Member Mark?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Permanent Secretary, the procurement system is around the corner.
Yes, sir.
Proclamation is supposed to take place on March 31st, 2017. Could you share with this committee what infrastructure you have put in place to facilitate the smooth entry of this law, which would be applicable to all ministries, including the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs?
To answer your question, Member Mark, there has been no general policy emanating that will indicate to us this is what is supposed to be done, this is what the unit is supposed to look like, this is what the designations within that unit. We have not received that kind of information. But what we have done within the ministry to prepare for the coming of the legislation, we have asked our legal unit, the Chief State Solicitor, to develop a training program for us so that we can take our members of staff through the legislation as a first step towards the coming of the legislation, so that the staff will become aware of what is required under the new legislation that is going to be put into effect. And that thus far is what we've done in order to make our staff aware of the impending legislation. The Chief State Solicitor is about to begin that training to take the staff through the rudiments of what the legislation requires. As per the staffing, Once we have the information as what is required in terms of a structure, in terms of the designations of offices that are within that particular structure, we will begin. The staff, the ministry, is aware that there will be a unit designated, the procurement unit. There will be designations. Just today, members of staff have asked whether the members of staff who are currently performing those functions, whether they would be absorbed into the unit or whether they would be thus sent to other units. But it's a question that I couldn't at that point because we don't know what the offices that will be a part of that unit, what will be the requirements of those offices, to know whether the officers can be absorbed, whether it would be lateral movement, whether they would have to apply for the positions, whether those are the questions that have been asked and for which thus far we've had no feedback.
So there has been no template issued?
No, thus far no.
So how is the ministry to be ready for the 31st of March? What is going to happen if the law is to be proclaimed and operationalized?
Well,
and we are in the month of January 25th.
Yes, sir. As I indicated, we are dealing with the legislation, making the staff aware of what is expected, what is required, what is coming. As soon as we are apprised of what is required of a unit, in the unit, we will have our we'll be in a ready mode in order to...
All right, may I continue? On the question of assets and the safeguarding of assets, we observed in your submission that the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs spent over $3 million last year in replacing equipment. In light of the straitened economic and financial situation facing Trinidad and Tobago, what steps are being taken by your ministry to reduce expenditure on the replacement of equipment in fiscal 2017? And as you're on that, may I also follow and ask what measures are being taken to reduce the yearly cost of repairs and maintenance? Okay, and finally,
sorry, sir.
Is there a mechanism to determine whether the missing items, because you have missing items in your inventory system, whether these are as a result of fraud or human error, and you have been able to discover or recover them?
Okay, my DPS would like to answer, so I'll have it.
With regard to the first question, a lot of the replacement of items really is done under minor equipment purchases. You did indicate, yes, that it's stringent times, so for this fiscal, we have gotten less money. So what we have to try to do actually is to try and balance how much we can spend on repairs to keep certain items in the condition that we need them to be in to operate. Particularly our vehicles, we have no funds to purchase new ones, so a lot of the time we set them on regular servicing schedules. So we have the records intact and we send them to service to keep them in proper condition. Actually, one of our oldest vehicles, I think right now, is about 17 years old. But we have it and we're using it because we know we have no funds to purchase new ones. Your second question, sir, was in terms of missing items. Because of the relocation, well, recently we have been trying to to tag everything, and we have them on asset registers. Prior to 2015, honestly, we cannot say whether items were missing due to human error or not. But recently, I can vouch for the fact that all our items have been tagged. We have an idea of where everything is, even with our relocation and our movement to the tower. We've been maintaining our warehouses. And on the cards for us soon in March will be attempts at doing border survey and properly having a proper record of what we have on hand.
Member Mahabir.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Ms. Dilshan, may I commend your ministry for having a 17-year-old vehicle. I think it is something which ought to be widely advertised in the rest of the public service, because there is absolutely no good reason why vehicles under proper maintenance cannot last easily 2 decades. I know from experience, personal. But that's not the gist of my question. The question is, how at this moment does your ministry go about procuring its goods and services, and how different is the current mechanism of procurement from that which is envisioned by the new legislation, which, as my colleague Senator Mark says, is due to be in force very soon? Thank you.
The process that is used for procurement, that has been settled by the Tenders Board and within the financial regulations, is what we use to apply currently for the purchases of equipment, for goods and services for the ministry. And we use the system, the 3-quote system. We get quotes. If perchance, if it's a vehicle I'm using, we have within the department, we set up a little evaluation committee where we evaluate the various quotes that may be submitted, and then we make a decision. So it's not to say we just use the lowest or the highest, or we have an evaluation committee set up to deal with certain matters. So that is a process that we use internally when purchasing goods and services. So if it's equipment, process is used. If, as I said, if it's a vehicle, which we have not within the last year, we use the same process.
So basically, would you say that the transition between the current process that you employ and the new legislation, the requirements of the new legislation come April the 1st, is going to be relatively smooth for your ministry, or do you think that there would be some major dislocations?
If I have to answer that, and to be very honest with you, Member Mahabir, I would like to say it should be a smooth transition, because we have been working as a ministry assiduously to ensure that our goods, our stock, we have inventoried most of everything. Our auditor is there. He has been going from department to department to ensure that all of the goods and services and stocks is in fact documented, because with the merger of the 2 ministries, we have a number of outlying district offices, which would have fallen under the Ministry of Legal Affairs at the point in time and fell by the wayside. But we have undertaken that process, and he has been very diligently going from department to department to ensure that all of the furniture and everything within the various divisions are in fact inventoried.
Member Bash?
Moving back to training again, are there any steps being taken to reduce expenses associated with training costs?
Are you talking generally, or are you talking in particular? Training costs? What we've done in the ministry, if we're talking on a broad-based training, what we've done in ministry, that when training, and we have done it within recent times in training, we train not just one person, but we try to train a broad cross-section of personnel within the department. So if we are training attorneys, we are training not just 1 or 2, we're training 30. Just recently, at the latter part of last year, we trained 30 persons, 30 legal persons in FEDIC. That's FEDIC, they did FEDIC training. So training as far as the department, depending on what the training is, we try to do a broad cross-section and not just individuals. Depending on what the training is. Really, depending on what the training is, it's not really in-house.
My other question is, for the persons who are selected to go on training, when they return to their departments, how did they disseminate knowledge gained from the training to other members of staff?
Well, one of the first things that members who are chosen to go on any kind of training must provide a report when they come back from the training session. And that, based on that, that is disseminated to, well, to the PS. Copy is put in the library of the what training may have been transferred, the transference of that knowledge is copy sent to the PS, copies put in the library, and the unit becomes a part of, they transfer it on the job with members of the particular unit.
Thank you, Madam PS. I want to thank you and the members of your staff for coming and sharing in this conversation with us. Before we close, I'd like to ask if there's any closing statement you'd like to make, including recommendations that you may wish the committee to consider in its report, and which will be designed to help you manage the inventory control aspect of this merged ministry.
Well, I just have two things I would like to say, and it would border on training, to see more training for, in this particular area, for members of, well, I have to say members of the service who would be dealing with, in fact, the new legislation, and also to have soon information provided as to what the whole process is going to be like, what it's going to look like, what the units are supposed to look like. So if we can have that information, as somebody would say, as soon as we can begin to really put measures in place to ensure that by the time the legislation is in fact, comes into effect, we will be able to hit the ground and run with it.
Thank you, Madam PS. There are a couple more questions we have, but we will send it to you in writing.
Sure.
And in our letter, we'll give a deadline,
Sure.
which we hopefully will be able to comply with. I want to thank you, the members of your ministry, for coming. You all are now discharged, and safe journey home. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This meeting is now suspended.
I know.
We now have the Integrity Commission, and I want to say a warm welcome at this late hour to the staff of the Commission. The purpose of this meeting of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee is to examine your department's system of inventory control. This meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast live. I will now therefore invite the representatives of the Integrity Commission to introduce themselves, and similarly, the members of the committee will follow.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you all for being here and for the invitation. I'm Jasmine Pascal, Registrar, Integrity Commission. I have here with me my team who will introduce themselves.
Good afternoon. My name is Aisha George, Acting Accounting Assistant.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman and members. I'm Natasha Elder St. Louis, IT Specialist.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. I'm Tarmati Chidi, Auditing Assistant.
Good afternoon, everyone. Andala Ramrup, Legal Officer 2.
Good afternoon. Sorry, everyone. I'm Beverly Ali Pierre, Acting Clerk 3.
Good afternoon, everyone. Melissa Sokla, Teacher and Record Specialist.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. D.V. Raja, Director of Corporate Administration.
Thank you very much. Members of the committee from my extreme right.
Sorry. Clarence Rambarat, member.
Nishwar Mahavir, member.
Maxi Kafi, member.
Lakram Bodo, Vice Chairman.
Wade Ma, member.
Alison Bash, member.
Member Webster Roy will be joining us shortly, and I am Bridget Anita George, Chairman. Our Secretary is Ms. Kiba Jacob, and our Assistant Secretary is Ms. Sharon Samuel. I would like to invite the Registrar to make a brief opening statement.
Thank you, Chair. The Accounting Officer is responsible for inventory control, which is safeguarding of the state's assets and properties. Also in the delivery of services. The direct control of the inventory falls under the Corporate Admin Division, which has 10 employees. They have a dedicated officer to the desk of the managing the inventory. Madam Chair, the Integrity Commission is continually reviewing all of our systems, and we're looking forward to these deliberations.
Thank you very much, Registrar. And to open our conversation this evening, I invite Member Coffey to begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now, I noticed in your submission, Madam Registrar, that there was no system of tagging. Now, you said you have 10 people in the Integrity Commission responsible for inventory control. Why was no system of tagging introduced before now?
Chair, I must say the stores regulations was contravened. However, we have looked at the matter, and we have a project going on presently which starts on the 24th of January and due to end on the 24th of February. We have in our possession a tagging machine and with labels, and we'll start that process soon.
No, you are the Integrity Commission. Are we talking about a financial regulation?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to ascertain whether it was an oversight, whether, what caused it not to be done.
Member, since my assumption and through investigation in the department, there was no tagging done. However, I have introduced the issue of tagging to address the issue of tagging.
Okay. In your submission, you said that tagging would begin in January?
Yes, this month.
So as of today, January 25th, how many items have been tagged?
I will pass you over to the record specialist. So.
Hi, good day. We have started identifying the labels. I was just to go now and start to actually label the items. We identify the number. We start on all the items. It's just now to just go and stick it on the furniture and equipment.
Okay. I want to go on to another item of your submissions in terms of procurement and using the three-code system rather than open tender. And that is also in contravention of another financial regulation. How, go through for me, how you arrived at just using that rather than going through the system as recommended by the Auditor General.
Can you identify for what particular item? Yeah.
It's your submission speaking to the three-code system. I can find it. It's page 11. What measures are currently employed by the state for?
We don't have an 11 number, so if you
Oh,
can.
sorry. Yeah.
Right. You could check it. I have
Page 16, sorry. Page 16. Oh.
My paper.
We don't have a page 16. If you,
Let me find it in your document. Okay, page 5. Page 5. Question 2, and it goes on with the regulations.
question 2 is items omitted from registry?
Right, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And
Allow
then-
the Director
and
of
it-
Corporate
and
Admin?
It goes on the code from the financial regulations at the bottom.
In the case of in the case of the query that was raised by the Auditor General's Department, our explanation for the first item was that we had sourced 2 other quotations, but they weren't made available to us, and we had moved forward because of the urgency of the acquiring the item. We had moved forward and acquired the item.
Okay.
But the option of the 3 quotes was pursued, but at the time we weren't getting the replies from 2 of the quotes.
Okay. Now, throughout your submissions, I'm seeing that you use a free-quote system rather than going open and advertising. Do you have a preferred list that you use of providers? Because if you follow the Central Tenders Board regulations, you would have a preferred list of vendors and use that 3 codes there. Is it that you just subjectively choose 3 persons and then go?
The Central Tenders Board, in their guidelines, had also said that for selective tendering, if the particular cost of the item and the time it takes to do the process outweigh the need, so that you would pursue just utilizing 3 quotes because it will take too long and the cost and so on.
But there is also, we also have a list of preferred suppliers that we use from time to time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I just have 2 other questions. The procurement legislation takes effect from the end of this month. How prepared are you for it in terms of organizing your staff and having a procurement department?
Well, training already started at my level. Then on the 13th of this month, the person in charge, that's the corporate admin, will be attending a training in public admin, which is providing the training in procurement with regard to the new procurement legislation. That's from the 13th to the 16th. Additionally, I've been in discussion with, I already contacted public admin. They have a preferred list of suppliers with regard to service providers with training in procurement. The IC, Integrity Commission, already wrote those officers to submit their proposals to us, where I will do an internal tender committee, set up an internal committee to look at the proposal and make recommendations. Because I I can say by the month of February, in the month of February, because in the letter stated such, in the month of February, we will be conducting training, in-house training for approximately 10 of our key employees.
Thank you.
Member Webster Roy.
Thank you. Madam Chair, you noted that you have a list of preferred suppliers. I wanted to know how that list was compiled, and in compiling that list, did you adhere to principles of accountability, integrity, and value for money?
Well, in terms of the suppliers, we would have done it over a period of time of experience. In some cases, like for example, for the supply of catering services, we would have utilized the caterers used by the Office of the Parliament, and which would have been pre-screened and so on. So in many of the cases, it was done on the basis of both persons contacting us and us sourcing suppliers.
Member Mahabir.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Really two questions. The first deals with the efficiency of your inventory control system. And the question is, are you, as of now, if a request were to be made to you to indicate what are the items of inventory you have in your possession, do you have a system in place where you would be able, within, say, an hour, to indicate to the investigator what the inventory is?
Less than an hour.
In less than an hour, so it's efficient. The second is, I'm looking now at the security, not only of inventory, but of the items in the possession of the Integrity Commission, which is, say, sensitive files. I would like to know exactly how you go about ensuring that your inventory is distributed efficiently, but that your files are protected securely.
Sure. Personal files, you're in reference, right? Personal files is secured within a vault, which has an electronic card reader, and access is only restricted to certain persons, a maximum of 3 persons, the registrar, the IT specialist, and the officer in charge of the vault. So that is quite secure. The organization too also has fully equipped cameras, so to ensure there is security. We also have security for persons entering the department on entrance and exit of the department.
Thank you very much. And coming back, but coming back to the integrity,
Yes.
to the issue of inventory. I
Yes,
know
sure.
you want to develop that, but on the issue of inventory, and I see you have an IT specialist here. Do you have an electronic form of inventory registration, or is it a card system? And then you can come back to the first question.
Our declarant files are also electronic. We have an inventory of all our declarants in a database format, and also of our other organizational files as well.
Right. Is it that there is a public service regulation which says that you must also keep paper copies?
Yes, no, there are paper copies.
So you have two?
Yeah,
you
we have two.
both.
We have both.
And
yeah,
therefore, there is
systems.
nothing preventing any state agency from duplicating the system that you have, which is a manual system with a paper trail and also an
electronic
system.
yes.
Very
yeah.
well. Thank you very much.
And I just wanted to add to our security as well concerning the our access, even to our DVR and our camera systems are also in a secure IT room, which there are only limited 2 persons to that room, right? So it's covered as well as the access in and out of our vaults and our DVR system. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to ask one question, and that comes from the lineup of officers here. I see that you have an internal auditing assistant. Madam Registrar, and I want to know if this officer is now permanently assigned to the Integrity Commission.
Madam Chair, no, the officer works at the Office of the President. We have shared service of the internal auditing. The Integrity Commission do not have a resident internal auditor.
Yeah, I understood that. I just thought that your position may have improved. So I really want to thank you, Madam Registrar, and your staff for remaining this late to have this short conversation with us. I am certain there are other questions we'd like to ask, and we'd send them to you in writing, because we do have another entity to examine, and time is against us. So I want to thank you all for being so cooperative and enlightening us with this conversation. You are now discharged, and I wish you all a safe journey home. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair and members.
This meeting is now suspended. Right. Good evening, and we now start our conversation with the Office of the Parliament. And I welcome the Clerk of the House and her supporting officers. The purpose of this meeting of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee is to examine your department's system of inventory control. This meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast live. I therefore now invite Madam Clerk and her supporting officers to introduce themselves, followed by the members of the committee.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I am Jackie Samson Miguel. I'm the Clerk of the House.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shelley-Ann Bartholomew, the Administrative Officer for Acton.
Good afternoon. My name is Lester Thomas, the Auditor 1, Acton.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Garrett Ferguson, ICT Director.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, members. My name is Stephen Boudram. I'm the Manager of the Constituency Operations.
I might invite members committee, starting from my extreme right.
Clarence Rambarat, member.
Dineshwar Mahabir, member.
Maxi Coffee, member.
Ayano.
Sorry. Lakrambodo, Vice Chairman.
Ayana Webster Roy, member.
Wade Mark, member.
Alison Bash, member.
And I am Bridget Anizet George, Chairman. We are ably assisted by our Secretary, Kiba Jacob, and our Assistant Secretary, Sharon Samuel. I guess this is an indication that we are a bit spent. I now invite Madam Clerk to make a brief opening statement.
Yeah. Well, the Office of the Parliament exists to provide support to the Houses of Parliament collectively, the Committees of Parliament collectively, and to members individually in the performance of their functions. We have among our core values things like professionalism, accountability, tolerance, and I must admit that we have as one of our strengths a very dynamic team of professional persons, some of whom you see sitting here this afternoon. We are very happy to present ourselves before you to respond to your concerns, if any, in relation to our inventory management system. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And I will invite the Vice Chairman of the committee to lead off the conversation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I say welcome again. Before we get into any of the questions regarding inventory, could I ask you, Madam Clerk, just to indicate as to the reasons for not providing the ministerial response to the first report of the committee and the written submission for internal audit? If you can perhaps indicate to us why this has been outstanding.
The responses will be provided to the committee before the end of this week, actually. As you are aware, we did receive the request not too long ago, and we are addressing the answers, and I give you the assurance that the response will be with you before the end of the week. Our apologies.
Thank you for that response, Madam Clerk. With regards to the assets, I note that the Parliament, on average, the Office of the Parliament would spend in the region of about 1.5 million per year to replace equipment. Can you perhaps give us an indication of how that money is spent, whether it relates only to the Parliament itself or it relates to the constituency sub-offices, just to give us an idea of how that is spent?
We provide furniture and equipment to the Office of the Parliament, constituency officers, and the Office of the Leader of the Opposition. We do also provide support to the Ombudsman's office, but they have their own votes. So the 1.5 million that we would have referred to would relate to equipment and furniture in relation to the Office of the Parliament, constituency officers, and the Office of the Leader of the Opposition. Most of that money would have been spent on computer equipment, electronic equipment. We no longer buy a lot of furniture, having moved here, because a lot of the furniture that we met here belongs to the actual building. So our expenditure is mostly in the area of computer equipment, electronic equipment, for the Parliament here and for constituency offices. We do buy some furniture for constituency offices, but that is usually at the beginning of a parliamentary term. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Just one more question. I mean, you do have a tremendous amount of responsibility because you have to service 41 constituency officers.
Yeah.
In terms of that responsibility and your system for monitoring that inventory, can you indicate to us, how satisfied you are with the system that you have in place for that?
In the Bread House, in this building, as well as in constituency offices?
Well, I'm looking more at the constituency offices because of the spread throughout the country and the challenges you might be facing.
Well, within recent times, we established a constituency management unit. The manager is here, and he can address the issue of inventory management within the constituency offices. But it is one system that we utilize. The same system that we utilize here is the same system that is used to manage the inventory at constituency offices. And I suppose we can elaborate more on that system if you wish, now or further along. Do you wish us to do it now? Okay, in that case, I pass to Mr. Gareth Ferguson, our IT manager.
Good afternoon once again. The inventory system that we use, or the asset management system, we use a program called, an application called VimSoft, VimBiz. It's a very comprehensive program that allows us to manage any number of assets, as well as their location and condition in terms of depreciation. So it's a very comprehensive system that we started using, and it's worked out very efficiently for us managing assets across any of the entities of Parliament.
If this is available elsewhere in the public sector, the system, has it been utilized elsewhere? It might be an unfair question.
No, we've done some demonstrations for some others. The software is for purchase, but we have customized it. It's fairly customizable for whoever the entity needs to use it. Up to recently, the Ministry of Public Admin has also inquired as to how we go about using it.
Member Mark?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Clerk of the House, in light of the imminent proclamation of the procurement legislation, could you tell this committee what steps are being taken by the Parliament to ready itself for this particular development in the coming period? I understand the proclamation, according to the Minister of Finance, will take place on the 31st of March, 2017. So could you tell us the state of readiness of the Parliament as it relates to this legislation?
Madam Chair and Member Mark, the Office of the Parliament has commenced the training of staff, beginning, yes, with one member of staff, and he's here with us, Mr. Stephen Budram. Perhaps, Stephen, you can explain the training that you're currently exposed to.
Good day, member. So the training that I've been selected to attend, it's a training that is being held by UNDP, and it's certification in procurement. It's a level 2 CIP certification, and it runs for 4 days. And once it's completed, we have an online assessment as well as a essay to write on how it is with the new legislation, the eminent procurement legislation, how it could actually be implemented within an organization. So once I get the training, it will be disseminated. A report will be prepared, and it would be disseminated to heads of department within Parliament.
Madam Clerk, what is the perceived size of the procurement unit, given the responsibilities that we have to execute as a parliament, the kind of procurement of goods and services that we have and will continue to engage in? What size are we looking at? And have you looked at the title or titles of the office holders that will make up this procurement unit?
A very interesting question, Madam Chair and Member Mark. The Parliament was actually in the process of preparing a note for the establishment of a procurement unit, and we were informed that there's been a policy decision that will soon be disseminated to all agencies of government for the establishment of procurement units. So in other words, that has already been decided, that each ministry and each government agency must have a procurement unit, and the size of the procurement unit would vary depending on the size of the agency. We are considered a small agency. I think it depends on the number of staff members you have. And I believe that the size of the unit that has been approved for agencies our size is comprised of approximately 6 people, headed by a chief procurement officer or some title to that effect. So we will be guided by government policy in this regard, but in preparation for that, we have commenced the training of staff, beginning with Mr. Budram, who will be required on his return to disseminate the training to others. We think we are able to identify the persons who we would like to assign to that unit. They will come, most of them, from the Administrative Support Unit, the unit that is currently involved in procurement for the Office of the Parliament. We may have to do recruitment, perhaps of 1 or 2 other persons, but we will try as best as possible to use available resources that we have here, human resources, personnel, to fill positions in that unit.
Member Coffey?
Madam Clerk, in terms of not just the office here, but the constituency offices, do you have a way to ascertain whether any items go missing?
Member, with the establishment of the Constituency Operations Management Unit, we have a system where the officers would be visiting the constituency offices. And once it is, every time they visit the constituency office, they would ensure the records within the constituency office. So if it is an item goes missing, based on the previous visit, we would be able to know that that some items may be missing in a constituency office. Also with the labeling within the offices, that's another system that is utilized whereby we actually track equipment within the offices.
So generally, from your experience, how many items go missing when you make your check, let's say, at the end of a term?
I don't think we've had many instances of that. Okay. We've had a couple of instances of theft at constituency offices. And usually, I think in those 2 instances, it was computer equipment. But we have ensured all the computer equipment in constituency offices. I think we have also ensured all members the mobile devices, your iPads, and everything that is not within this building. So on those occasions on which we had a theft in the constituency offices, we were able to have the items replaced through the provider of the insurance services. In addition to which, of course, we made reports to the TTPS, and there were investigations. To be honest, I can't say whatever was the outcome of the police investigations, but we were able to have the items replaced because all our all equipment that we have in constituency offices are insured.
Okay. Thank you.
Member Webster Roy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In your submission, you noted that it takes approximately 3 to 5 minutes to tag an item. However, you did not achieve 100% in tagging. Is there a reason for that?
Yes. The VimBiz software that we use for the inventory management actually doesn't do the tagging. We use an add-on program which we built in-house. Initially, when we started tagging items, we used what you call a two-dimensional thing. We use a barcode and a serial number. But that doesn't really allow us to verify information on the items. So we had switched to QR codes, which is the new form of tagging items. So we are in the process of then doing over all of the tags on the devices so that we can actually verify the devices and furniture, equipment, furniture, any artifact that we have in the offices very easily from a cell phone.
How soon you anticipate that will complete the process?
The process should take about 3 months to complete. Yes, including the constituency and the office of the Parliament.
So let me ask, is that, I just want to ask something. When you said that currently approximately 90% of items tagged, this is the new system we're talking about?
I just wanted to clarify that. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah?
So they are all tagged within the old system of tagging,
Yeah.
which is all for us, and it's the barcode system.
Yeah.
The QR code system, which we are now converting to or transitioning to, that is what will take us another 3 months to complete. So for most of the items, even that we have in the building, you may see 2 tags behind them. One would be the barcodes, and the others would be the QR code system.
So properly stated then, 100% are tagged with the barcode.
Yes.
We're now migrating to a new system.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Right, thank you. Member Mahabir and then Member Rambaraj.
Very well. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I shall be very short. Parliament has a number of excellent vehicles. I had the opportunity of having use of one recently on a field trip. I did not know we owned a bus which was so efficient and dedicated to the task to which it was assigned. Given that these are really very expensive vehicles, and given that the fiscal situation in the country is such that we will not be able to replace vehicles as often as we would like, what measures, Madam Clerk, are you putting in place to ensure that these vehicles that we currently possess can serve the Parliament for a long period of time? Thank you.
Madam Chair, Member, Senator Mahabir, we have a vehicle management policy that ensures that the vehicles are serviced and maintained on a rotation. The policy clearly identifies the use for which the vehicles can be put, the management arrangements for the vehicles, and the process for the disposal of vehicles, which are all in line with established rules within the context of the public service. All of this comes under the management of the Office of the Marshal of the Parliament, who has responsibility for this area of management. And there is an officer called, who is an assistant marshal, who has responsible for the day-to-day management of the vehicles and ensuring that the policy is properly followed. So right now we have six vehicles, 6 SUVs, 2 buses, 2 motorcycles. And all of these vehicles fall under the management of the Marshal of the Parliament, who utilizes a vehicle management policy to ensure that the vehicles are properly maintained. The policy also ensures that we always have a vehicle or vehicles in-house to service the needs of the organization, while there are others that are being serviced. So there's a rotation system, a schedule actually that they have, which incidentally I was able to see today.
Member Ramara?
I just have one quick question, but before I ask my question, the Parliament, among the entities, even ministries in Trinidad, Parliament has the most advanced system of communication and ICT. I view it with a sense of pride. Facebook, the website, and the channel. I don't listen to too much radio. But to do that, you have invested, I'm sure, in a lot of small but expensive electronic equipment. Do you have a system of tracking the small but valuable stuff electronically?
We do, give you an example, any piece of equipment, all the equipment is tagged. We know the location of all the items, including members' iPads. We know that it's in your possession. Equipment that we have in-house, for things to leave in-house, they must, we do an equipment note. So we know who is taking items out of the building, and we know when they come back into the building. We lodge a copy, so no one gets to walk out of, even on a weekend. It must be on an equipment note, and a copy of that equipment note must be lodged with the police. So nobody is able to then take equipment out of the building without our knowledge, right? And when it's returned, we do a routine check to ensure the status of the equipment, that it wasn't damaged while outside, and it is in full working order when returned.
The electronic tracking capability extend to assets at constituency offices and sub-offices?
You mean if you take, remember you asking if you take something out of your constituency office, it will be able to track that?
Yeah, anything like that, particularly the computer equipment.
Well, when the officers visit, that's when we would know, and they do their checks of your constituency office. They would know if an item is missing, because part of the checks that the constituency management unit staff ought to do would include a check of inventory. In addition to the constituency management unit staff, we have the audit staff, and I believe they check every quarter? Every quarter, they go to constituency offices and check. So we have a double checking system. We have the administrative staff, which would be the constituency management unit staff, and then we have the audit staff. So I suppose if something is in fact missing at a constituency office, we will eventually pick it up. In addition to those two checks, we have the external auditors who make visits from time to time. But bear in mind, from the time we purchase something, the system we have that we utilize, it actually begins from the tendering process. All of that information goes into the VIMBIZ data. The tendering process, who was asked to quote, the selection process, who was selected, the invoice order that was used, the check that was generated, when the item was procured. They actually take a picture of the item that goes into the system, and then when it's let's say it is placed in the constituency of let's say Faizabad, the code, the tag will generate the data, and then it would be placed on the equipment. Then the equipment will be placed in the constituency office. So when the officers visit, then they will be able to confirm that the tag that is on that equipment matches with the description and the particulars of the item as purchased by Parliament. Because it's these are external offices. You know, persons could remove tags, yeah? I mean, it has never happened, and put them onto another item of equipment, and our equipment could walk away.
Yeah.
But because of the system we use, even the picture of the actual piece of furniture or equipment is seen when they scan it using their cell phones.
The constituency offices. Yes.
Yeah, this average relates to all equipment for Office of the Parliament and constituency offices. But we had asked for an average. This was an average. So I'm sorry I don't have how much was actually spent last year, because last year was the beginning of a parliament. So it may have been a little more than this, because we did some replacements in the constituency offices.
And in light of the economic challenges that the country currently faces, are there any steps being taken by the Parliament to reduce these expenses that have been incurred to replace equipment? I mean, not talking about the unusual year of the beginning of the Parliament, using your average.
Yeah, well, Madam Chair, we got quite a lot less than this year, and we have we intend to stick within the sum that was appropriated to us, or perhaps even spend less. For that matter, I don't think we have procured any items of equipment or furniture for the financial year as yet. But having said that, we do have to do some replacements in relation to certain items of equipment for the operations of the channel. They fall due to be replaced in this financial year. So we are going to try to stick within the budget, the amount budgeted by Parliament. But there are some pieces of equipment that unless we do obtain them, we may not be able to ensure a seamless transmission of parliamentary meetings and sittings. In fact, we brought down the suppliers of the equipment in November,
Yes.
with a view to seeing if we can implement some additional maintenance of the equipment so that it can last a little longer. Perhaps Garrett could tell us a little bit more about that. But we believe that sooner rather than later, we will have to do some replacement. Remember, this channel is since 2007, and we have not really been replacing equipment, although it's driven by equipment. It's built on an IT platform, not very labor intensive. So we do have to do some replacement of equipment, but we'll try very hard to stick within what we have been provided. Thank you.
Okay, Madam Clerk, I would like to thank you and the members of your team who've come here at this late hour to assist the committee. Just before we close, I'd like to invite you to make any brief closing statement with respect to maybe any recommendations you may feel the committee should consider in assisting you in better handling the portfolio of inventory control.
Touch on the issue of disposal. That has been an issue for me because, well, until the implementation of the new procurement regime, which provides a new method for the disposal of equipment and furniture, we rely upon the Ministry of Finance to dispose or to approve the disposal of furniture and equipment. And I can tell you, well, it's one Ministry of Finance, and there are several ministries and departments of disposing. So sometimes you have unserviceable items and furniture waiting to be disposed, sometimes in excess of 2-3 years. And we feel that if items of furniture and equipment can be disposed of at a faster rate, the government could put those unserviceable equipment, could get value or use for them. For example, you have schools that need, it could be chairs that we may not, we may no longer be using. You have, what is this called, this place that builds Habitat for Humanity. You have organizations that would readily take the old furniture that we no longer use in the public service. But because you have to wait to get permission to dispose, I think that is unfortunate, and I hope that the committee could recommend that the methods for disposing of equipment and furniture in the public service should be improved. I think that was a 1964 1965 regulation, and it is pretty dated, and it's not a very efficient system. I have a difficulty with it.
After we try to put this one call.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I want to thank you again, and I do hope you all reach home safely. To the members of the listening public, I'd like to thank you for having stuck with us through this inquiry process. This meeting is now suspended. Pleasant evening to you all.